They were never meant to be found buried beneath layers of earth, sealed by centuries of dust, silence, and forgetting. These objects waited patiently for the moment they would resurface, not as answers but as questions, questions so unsettling that they challenge everything we believe about our past, our origins, and the limits of ancient knowledge. Across deserts, mountains, jungles, and ocean floors, archaeologists have uncovered artifacts that seem profoundly out of place. Tools far too advanced for the eras they were found in. Carvings that resemble machines long before machines were ever supposed to exist. Objects shaped with precision that modern science still struggles to replicate. Relics that feel less like remnants of history and more like interruptions in it. Each discovery tells a story that doesn't quite fit, and yet there they are, unearthed by accident, pulled from forgotten layers of time, silent, immovable, undeniable, like messages left behind by someone or something that never expected us to be ready. Were these artifacts created by an ancient civilization whose knowledge was far greater than we've been taught? Evidence of lost technologies erased by catastrophe, war, or deliberate destruction? Or are they traces of encounters that history refuses to acknowledge, whispers of influences not meant to exist within the accepted timeline of humanity? For decades, these discoveries have sparked fierce debate. Some scholars dismiss them as mistakes or coincidences, others quietly archive them away, labeling them anomalies, curiosities, or misinterpretations, and in some cases, the artifacts vanish entirely, locked in vaults, buried in storage rooms, or removed from public record altogether. Perhaps because the truth they suggest is too disruptive, too destabilizing, too impossible to reconcile with the version of history we've built our world upon. Tonight, here on Sleepless Folks, we step beyond official narratives and academic comfort zones. We peel back the layers of time and examine the forbidden relics, the ones that refuse to behave, refuse to explain themselves, and refuse to stay forgotten. Objects that don't just challenge history, but threaten to rewrite it entirely. So settle and let the noise of the modern world fade away. Open your mind not to belief, but to possibility, because once you've seen these artifacts, once you've heard their stories, the past may never feel quite as distant or as settled as it once did. The Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca had a face that should never have been there. High in the Toluca Valley, where the air grows thin and the land folds into quiet hills, lies the ancient site of Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca today. It is a place of silence, stone terraces softened by erosion, collapsed walls half swallowed by earth, and the distant whisper of wind passing through what once were sacred spaces, long before conquest or empire. This settlement thrived as part of the complex world of pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, shaped by ritual, agriculture, and a deep connection to the land for centuries. Its secrets slept beneath layers of soil and stone. Then, in the early 20th century, during a carefully documented archaeological excavation led by Jose Garcia Payen, something emerged that did not belong to this world, or at least not to this version of history. Beneath 3 intact floors of a burial chamber, stacked deliberately one atop another, archaeologists uncovered a sealed tomb. The layers showed no signs of intrusion, and no collapse, no disturbance. Everything about the chamber suggested continuity, reverence, and ritual closure across generations. Inside lay offerings familiar to the region: turquoise beads, obsidian blades, ceramic fragments, objects shaped by hands that belonged unmistakably to ancient Mesoamerica. But among them rested something profoundly different: a small terracotta head, roughly the size of a human palm at first glance. It seemed almost unremarkable, but the longer it was studied, the more unsettling it became. The face was bearded, the features were sharp and symmetrical, the expression calm, composed, almost classical. The proportions, the sculptural style, the subtle detailing of the hair and headdress all pointed towards something entirely foreign to many observers. The resemblance was unmistakable Roman. Its alone would have been strange, but the context made it nearly impossible to ignore if the burial chamber was dated to the late pre-Hispanic period, sometime between the late 15th and early 16th centuries before Europeans were known to have entered the Valley of Mexico. There was no colonial debris, no European materials, no metal, no glass, no trace of contact terra contamination years later. Scientific testing deepened the mystery rather than resolving it. Thermoluminescence analysis suggested that the terracotta head itself could be much older than the burial, possibly crafted sometime between the 9th century BC and the 13th century CE. The dates overlapped just enough to confuse, but not enough to comfort if the object was ancient. How had it traveled across an ocean? If it was recent, how had it ended up sealed beneath multiple undisturbed floors, surrounded by artifacts that predated European contact? Scholars searched for reasonable answers. Perhaps the stratigraphy had shifted naturally over centuries. Perhaps the head had been dropped into the site during excavation, as some suggested it might have been planted, deliberately or accidentally, by someone working at the ruins. Yet each explanation weakened under scrutiny. The burial chamber showed no signs of disruption. The floors above it were intact, the context was clean. The object was not found near the surface, but deep within ritual space where chance intrusion becomes difficult to defend. Art historians weighed in, examining the beard, the hairstyle, the pointed cap. These were not generic features, they aligned closely with Roman figurines from the 2nd or 3rd century CE. Not perfectly but disturbingly well, and so the questions began to multiply. Could Roman ships have been blown off course, carried by currents into the Atlantic, drifting for months before reaching the known shores? Could fragments of their cargo or even survivors have reached the Americas without leaving a wider archaeological footprint? Could there have been rare, indirect contacts between worlds we assume never touched? Or is this object something else entirely, a coincidence frozen in clay? An error of context that appears meaningful only because we search for meaning. If it is Roman, where are the others like it? Where are the traces of presence, however faint? And if it is not Roman, why does it wear the face of a civilization separated by oceans and centuries? Today, the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca head rests quietly behind museum glass. It has been measured, catalogued, debated, and often dismissed, yet it refuses to disappear. It returns again and again in discussions of ancient contact. As though history itself has not finished deciding what to do with it, it exists in a fragile space between certainty and possibility, where archaeology brushes against imagination, and where accepted narratives begin to fray at the edges. Perhaps it is nothing more than a misplaced curiosity, or perhaps it is a reminder that the past is not as sealed as we believe. That history is layered, complex, and full of silences we have yet to interpret. The small terracotta face gazes outward, still calm and readable, almost knowing whether it belonged to a traveler, a forgotten exchange, or an impossible coincidence. Its true story remains buried somewhere between the known and unthinkable, and until it speaks more clearly, it stands as a quiet challenge to certainty itself. The Codex Gigas, the book that watches back as we leave behind the mysteries buried beneath the soil of ancient Mexico. Our journey drifts towards something far more elusive, not an object shaped by stone or clay, but by ink, parchment, and a mind consumed by devotion or obsession. In a quiet, dimly lit chamber of the National Library of Sweden, behind thick protective glass, rests a manuscript unlike any other ever created. It does not merely sit there, it seems to endure, to observe, bound in heavy leather darkened by centuries. Its pages yellowed yet remarkably intact. This book dwarfs all other medieval manuscripts, nearly a meter tall and weighing more than 75 kilograms. It feels less like a book and more like an altered. Its name is Codex Gigas, Latin for the giant book, but history remembers it by a far more unsettling title, the Devil's Bible. Open its massive covers, and you are met with endless columns of precise Latin script, line after line, page after page, written in a hand so consistent it appears almost inhuman. There are no corrections, no visible hesitation, no signs of fatigue. It is as though the pen never faltered, never doubted, never paused. The contents alone are staggering. The complete Old and New Testaments, historical writings by Josephus, medical treatises, calendars, legal codes, magical formulas, exorcisms, astrological observations. An entire medieval worldview compressed into a single monumental volume. It is not merely a religious text, but a total archive of knowledge, belief, and fear. And then, midway through the manuscript, something breaks the rhythm. A single full-page illustration interrupts the sacred flow. It is not an angel, not a saint, not a symbol of divine mercy. It is the devil himself. The figure crouches between two towering structures, grotesque and commanding. Its claws press against the frame as if restraining its own emergence. The tongue protrudes unnaturally. The eyes are wide, fixed, disturbingly alert. This is not a decorative warning tucked into the margins. It is a declaration of presence for centuries. This image has ignited speculation, dread, and fascination. According to legend, the Codex Gigas was written by one man, a monk who broke his sacred vows and was sentenced to a living death. Sealed inside his cell to be walled up alive in a final act of desperation, he begged for mercy, promising to create a book that would contain all human knowledge in a single night. As the story goes, when the task proved impossible, he turned not to God, but to something darker. He offered his soul in exchange for help, and the devil answered by mourning. The manuscript was complete. In gratitude or submission, the monk included the devil's portrait within its pages. Historians dismiss this as legend, a medieval moral tale warning against pride and forbidden ambition, yet even stripped of myth, the Codex Gigas remains profoundly unsettling. Scientific analysis confirms what the legend claims in part. The entire manuscript was written by a single hand. The ink is uniform. The script never changes. There are no corrections across nearly 1,000 pages. Experts estimate that even working relentlessly, it would have taken at least 20 to 30 years to complete a lifetime devoted to one book. What kind of mind undertakes such a task? And why does a monastic manuscript include not only scripture, but magic, medicine, and ritual practices often condemned by the Church itself? The Codex was created in the early 13th century, likely in a Benedictine monastery in what is now the Czech Republic. From there, it passed through centuries of upheaval, fires, plagues, war. During the 30 Years' War, Swedish forces seized it as spoils and carried it to Stockholm, where it remains today. Wherever it traveled, stories followed. Monasteries that housed it declined. Fires broke out. Misfortune seemed to gather around it like a shadow. Superstition, perhaps for coincidence, but the whispers never stopped. Then there is the matter of what is missing. At some point in its long history, several pages were cleanly removed from the Codex. No one knows when, no one knows by whom. Their contents are lost. Some believe they held administrative records or additional medical notes. Others believe they contain something far more dangerous: rituals, names, or formulas deemed too powerful to survive. The truth vanished with the pages. The parchment itself deepens the mystery. More than 160 animal skins were required to produce it. Each page is smooth, flawless, and astonishingly well preserved. A consistency of the text shows no emotional variation, no physical decline, as though written in a single, suspended state of concentration. That impossibility is what keeps the legend alive. Some modern theorists suggest hidden patterns within the manuscript, numerical structures, encoded rhythms, symbolic geometry. Others speculate that the scribe may have written in a trance-like state, guided by something he did not fully understand. To them, the Codex Gigas is not merely a book, it is a threshold. Today, visitors stand before it in silence, Separated only by glass, the pages glow softly under controlled light. The devil still stares outward, unchanged, as though guarding what lies beside him. And as we look upon this colossal relic, equal parts scripture and shadow, we are left with questions that refuse to settle. Who was the man who wrote it? What drove him to dedicate his life to such a singular creation? And in those long, sleepless years of writing, was he truly alone? Perhaps the Codex Gigas is not a testament to evil, nor to divine inspiration alone, but to something far more human: our hunger for total understanding, our fear of the unknown, our willingness to stand at the edge of light and darkness, and write anyway. And somewhere, in the quiet spaces of ancient libraries and forgotten monasteries, other secrets may still be waiting, silent, patient, watching back as genetic disc, the stone that remembers life from the shadows of medieval monasteries and the ink-stained pages of forbidden manuscripts. Our journey now leads us somewhere far older and far more unsettling, away from parchment and prayer, towards something not written, but carved, not born of faith, but of knowledge so precise it challenges the very limits of ancient science. High in the cool, mist-covered mountains of Colombia, near a region once inhabited by the Muisca people, lies a landscape rich with history. The Muisca were master artisans, renowned for their goldwork and symbolic craftsmanship, a culture whose sophistication astonished even the Spanish conquistadors who encountered them. Yet among ceremonial offerings and ritual objects, one discovery stands apart from everything we expect of the ancient world. It is a smooth, dark stone disc, roughly the size of a human hand, perfectly circular, polished to an almost unnatural sheen, carved from a material known as lyddite, dense, brittle stone often compared to black shale or granite at first glance. It appears decorative, perhaps ceremonial, but the longer one looks, the harder it becomes to dismiss. Etched across its surface are intricate symbols arranged with deliberate symmetry, figures that seem to move in sequence, as if telling a story not of gods, not of animals, but of life itself. Many believe the carvings depict stages of human reproduction: cellular division, fertilization, embryonic development, and the growth of a fetus within the womb. The shapes resembling sperm and ova, forms that echo microscopic processes invisible to the naked eye. Each engraving is remarkably precise, balanced, and intentional, as though guided by anatomical understanding rather than artistic abstraction. This object has become known as the genetic disc. Its discovery is shrouded in uncertainty. According to accounts, it surfaced in the 1990s, reportedly found by a Colombian prospector named Elsinore Jaime Gutierrez Liga. It was not alone. Alongside it were other objects, small figurines and tablets carved from the same dark stone, many bearing similar themes of anatomy and reproduction. Together, they would later be referred to as the Liga collection. The material itself deepens the mystery. Lyddite is notoriously difficult to work with. It fractures easily. One miscalculated strike can shatter it entirely. Yet the lines on the disc are smooth, deep, and uniform, as if cut with tools capable of extraordinary precision. Some researchers have suggested that even with modern equipment, reproducing such detail on this stone would be a formidable challenge. And so the question emerges, quietly at first, then insistently: who made this? Mainstream archaeologists urge caution. Much of what is known about the genetic disc comes from private collections, not controlled excavations, without stratigraphy, without verified context. Its age cannot be confidently established. Skeptics argue it may be a modern creation, carved in recent decades and retrofitted with ancient meaning. Yet others hesitate to dismiss it so easily. The imagery, they argue, is too coherent and too consistent and too anatomically suggestive to be accidental. The sequence of forms appears ordered, instructional almost, not random decoration, but deliberate narrative for those who have studied it closely. The disc feels less like symbolic art and more like a visual manual, an attempt to encode knowledge into stone still. Alternative explanations remain. Perhaps the disc represents fertility in a spiritual sense. Many ancient cultures revered reproduction as sacred. Expressing it through symbolic abstraction, could modern viewers simply be projecting contemporary scientific understanding onto imagery whose original meaning has been lost to time? Yet even that explanation struggles against the precision of the carving. No known tools from pre-Columbian Colombia match what would be required to engrave lyddite at this level. No records describe such objects, no parallels exist in recognized Wicca iconography of the disc stands alone, isolated not just physically, but conceptually. Some researchers, moving beyond conventional frameworks, propose more unsettling possibilities. Could the disc be a remnant of an advanced civilization erased by catastrophe? A culture that understood biological processes long before microscopes and modern science? Or could it represent knowledge transmitted from elsewhere through contact, inheritance, or means we have yet to comprehend? These ideas, of course, lie beyond accepted archaeology. But the genetic disc persists precisely because it refuses to settle into any one explanation. It remains in private hands. Few have examined it directly. No comprehensive peer-reviewed study has resolved its origin, age, or purpose. It exists in a liminal space between artifact and anomaly, between skepticism and wonder. As light moves across its polished surface, the carvings catch faint reflections, like constellations frozen in stone, whether shaped by ancient hands or modern imagination. The disc continues to whisper a silent message, one that speaks not only of where life begins, but of how much we may have forgotten about our past. And as we turn from this enigmatic relic and continue deeper into the shadowed corridors of forbidden discoveries, one question lingers, quietly unsettling. If knowledge this precise could truly be carved into stone long ago, what else might still lie buried beneath the surface of history, waiting patiently to be remembered? Bashplemi Lake Tablet, the script that should not exist, in the quiet highlands of southern Georgia, where mist drifts low across volcanic stone and the waters of an ancient lake remain almost and naturally still. A discovery emerged that would quietly unsettle historians and linguists alike, not with grandeur or spectacle, but with silence. A silence carved into stone along the shoreline of Lake Bashplemi, in a region long shaped by tectonic forces and deep human history. Local fishermen came upon what appeared to be nothing more than a dark, weathered slab of basalt. It lay partially buried, smoothed by centuries of wind, water, and time. At first glance, it was unremarkable, just another stone among many, but when it was lifted and turned toward the light, something impossible revealed itself. Its surface was covered in symbols, not random scratches, not decorative markings, but deliberate, precise carvings arranged in ordered rows, 60 characters in total. 39 of them unlike anything previously documented, each symbol etched with care, balanced and intentional, as though written by a hand that understood not only form, but meaning. The artifact would come to be known as the Bashplemi Lake Tablet, roughly the size of a large book, carved from locally sourced volcanic basalt. The tablet immediately raised troubling questions. Basalt is not an easy material to work with. It is dense, resistant, and forgiving, and yet the symbols were not crudely hacked. Analysis revealed that the engravings were first outlined using the conical drilling technique, then carefully smoothed with a rounded tool. This was not casual labor. It required planning, time, and specialized skill. Whoever carved this stone knew exactly what they were doing, and yet what they were writing remains unknown. No existing alphabet matches the script as scholars compared it to Proto-Carthulian markings. to early Phoenician forms, even to distant writing systems from ancient India and the western Iberian Peninsula. Patterns appeared, echoes emerged, but no direct lineage could be established. Each comparison ended the same way, with more questions than answers. The tablet has been tentatively dated to the Late Bronze Age or Early Iron Age, between 3,000 and 4,000 years ago, a time of profound transformation across the ancient world. Metallurgy was advancing, trade routes were expanding, the societies were becoming more complex. Yet no known evidence suggests that a fully developed written script existed in this region during that period, and yet, here it was. This alone forces an uncomfortable possibility. Either our understanding of early literacy in the Caucasus is incomplete, or something has been lost, entirely erased. The purpose of the tablet remains a matter of speculation. Some researchers believe it may record a military event, a list of names, or a ritual offering to deities long forgotten. Others suggest it could be administrative, a ledger or decree meant to preserve authority or memory. The repetition of certain symbols hints at structure, perhaps numbers, titles, or grammatical markers, but without a key, without a bilingual reference, or related inscriptions. The script refuses to yield its meaning. What deepens the mystery further is its isolation. No similar tablets have been found nearby. No fragments, no repetitions. The surrounding Manisi region is archaeologically rich, home to ancient settlements, obsidian tools, geometric stone structures, and evidence of long-term habitation. And yet, nothing else like this has surfaced. Was this tablet an anomaly, or the last surviving trace of a writing tradition now entirely erased? Some scholars have reached even further back into the realm of legend. Ancient Greek myths speak of the Colchians, peoples of this region, possessing a divine or golden script, said to be known to the gods themselves, a mythical writing system, never seen, never proven. Most dismiss these stories as poetic invention, and yet, standing before the Bashplemi tablet, one cannot help but feel the pull of such legends. Because the stone does not behave like a mistake, it feels intentional, purposeful, as though it was never meant for casual eyes, but for someone somewhere who knew how to read it. And today, the tablet rests under careful study, photographed, scanned, analyzed, and still it speaks nothing. Its symbols remain silent, locked behind a language that no longer exists or has yet to be recognized. It is a reminder that writing, once invented, does not always survive, that knowledge can vanish, that civilizations may leave behind only whispers, and perhaps most unsettling of all, the Bashplemi Lake tablet suggests that human history may contain chapters we are not yet prepared to read. As the dark basalt absorbs the light around it, its carved symbols seem to wait, a patient and moving, as if they know that one day someone may finally understand what was written beside the waters of a quiet lake thousands of years ago. Until then, the message remains hidden, not lost. Justin read. The Lake Winnipesaukee Mystery Stone, the stone that rose from silent waters in the heart of New England, where forested hills descend gently toward the glistening expanse of Lake Winnipesaukee. The landscape appears timeless. The lake stretches wide beneath open skies, its surface shifting between sapphire and silver as clouds pass overhead. Pines crowd the shoreline, and small towns rest quietly at the water's edge, carrying the unhurried rhythm of generations. To most who visit, the lake offers only beauty and calm, but beneath its tranquil surface, something waits, something that does not belong. For more than a century, whispers have surrounded an object pulled from the depths of these waters, an artifact so subtle in appearance, yet so troubling in implication, that it continues to resist every attempt at explanation. It has come to be known simply as the Lake Winnipesaukee Mystery Stone. At first glance, The stone appears in remarkable, roughly the size of a large grapefruit, dark in color, smooth to the touch. Its surface bears the soft polish of long submersion, as though time itself has been patiently wearing it down. But closer inspection reveals what truly sets it apart. Carved into the stone are precise geometric markings, and deeply etched symbols arranged with symmetry and intent, not random, not decorative, but deliberate. And like the petroglyphs commonly left behind by ancient cultures, these engravings do not resemble animals, tools, or known symbolic motifs. Instead, they form abstract patterns, circles, lines, and shapes that appear measured, calculated, almost mechanical in their execution. Some observers have likened them to celestial charts, others to schematics. The few have suggested they resemble nothing seen before at all. The stone was reportedly recovered in the late 19th century during dredging operations in the lake amid sunken timber and sediment. It emerged as an anomaly distinct from the surrounding geology. Its markings immediately drew attention, sparking debate that has never truly settled. Early explanations were cautious. Some believed it to be the work of indigenous peoples, a ritual object or symbolic carving whose meaning had been lost. Others dismissed it outright as a hoax or a curiosity carved by a modern hand and later submerged. But as scientific analysis advanced, the mystery deepened. Geological studies revealed that the stone's composition did not fully match the native rock formations of the area. Trace elements suggested it may have originated elsewhere, carried by glacial movement or transported intentionally over great distances. The stone itself appeared ancient, formed under intense geological conditions long before human presence in the region. And yet the carvings were clearly far younger. This contradiction lies at the heart of the enigma. How does an ancient stone come to bear markings of unmistakable intent? Who carved them and why? Some researchers propose that the stone could represent an early symbolic language, a proto-writing system that never evolved or survived. Others suggested it may have served as a navigational device, an astronomical reference, or a ceremonial object tied to cycles of time or seasonal movement. More controversial voices pointed to the precision of the engravings, the symmetry, the consistency of depth, the smoothness of the cuts. They argued that such work would require tools more advanced than those traditionally attributed to cultures of the region. This is where the mystery steps beyond archaeology and into uncertainty. Of local folklore, as it often does, filled the silence left by unanswered questions. Stories spread of strange lights flickering across the lake at night, of objects that surfaced only to disappear again, of stones had carried messages meant for a time not yet arrived. While these accounts remain anecdotal, they reflect the grip the stone has held on the imagination of those who encounter its story. Modern imaging techniques have only added complexity. Laser scans and high-resolution photogrammetry revealed micro-grooves invisible to the naked eye, channels so fine they suggest controlled, intentional carving. Whether symbolic or functional remains unknown. Some see evidence of lost craftsmanship, others warn of human tendency to find patterns where none exist. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the stone is its isolation. No settlements nearby, no ruins, no additional artifacts to place it within a known cultural framework. It stands alone, a single message without a sender, a question without context. Was it hidden deliberately, dropped accidentally, or left behind by people whose history has been entirely erased? The Lake Winnipesaukee Mystery Stone occupies a space between certainty and speculation, between science and silence. It refuses to settle into a single narrative. It does not announce its purpose, it simply exists, and as the lake's waters ripple gently above the place where it once rested, the stone reminds us of something unsettling yet deeply human, that our understanding of the past is incomplete, that knowledge can vanish, that meaning can survive without memory. For every mystery solved, another waits beneath the surface, silent, watching, unexplained. The Voynich Manuscript, a book no one can read. Deep within the quiet vaults of Yale University's Voynich Rare Book Library rests an object that has defied understanding for more than a century. Protected by glass and climate-controlled silence, it lies closed most of the time, as if even now it prefers not to be disturbed. This is the Voynich Manuscript, one of the most enigmatic books ever created. At first glance, it appears in remarkable bound volume of pale vellum, its pages yellowed by age, its edges softened by centuries of careful handling. There is nothing outwardly dramatic about its size or form, and yet, the moment its pages are opened, the familiar world of language dissolves. Line after line of strange symbols fills the manuscript, looping characters, delicate strokes, repeating forms arranged with unmistakable discipline. The text flows left to right, evenly spaced, structured like a real language, yet it corresponds to none known on Earth. No alphabet matches it, no cipher key unlocks it. No translation has ever been agreed upon. Between the lines of this indecipherable script bloom images that only deepen the mystery. Plants that resemble nothing found in nature, yet seem constructed from familiar botanical parts. Roots twist into impossible shapes, leaves merge and divide, and naturally flowers bloom in ways that feel intentional, symbolic, and strangely precise. Turn the page, and the manuscript becomes something else entirely. As circular diagrams appear, astronomical charts filled with stars, suns, and moons as zodiac-like wheels populated with symbols that echo medieval astrology but diverge just enough to feel foreign elsewhere. Human figures emerge, small, stylized bodies immersed in pools of green and blue liquid, connected by elaborate systems of pipes and chambers. Their expressions are neutral, their gestures deliberate, as if engaged in processes long forgotten. Radiocarbon dating places the creation of the manuscript in the early 15th century, between 1404 and 1438. The vellum itself confirms this timeline. Yet nothing else about the book fits neatly into that historical moment. Its author remains unknown, its place of origin uncertain, its purpose completely unclear. The manuscript's early history is fragmented and shadowed. It passes through the hands of scholars, physicians, alchemists, and collectors across Europe, always admired, always misunderstood. Its trail becomes clearer only in the early 20th century, when a rare book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich acquired it from him. The manuscript took the name by which it is now known, but naming it did nothing to tame it. What immediately strikes anyone who studies the Voynich manuscript is its consistency. The handwriting never changes, the spacing remains uniform. There are no corrections, no hesitations, no visible signs of trial and error. Whoever wrote it knew exactly what they were doing, or was copying something they understood perfectly. Scholars eventually divided the manuscript into sections: botanical, astronomical, biological, pharmaceutical, and long passages of uninterrupted text. Each section suggests purpose, structure, intention, and yet none yield meaning. For decades, attempts to decode the manuscript have failed. During World War II, some of the world's most skilled cryptographers, men who broke enemy codes and reshaped history, studied it. They found patterns consistent with real languages, word-like structures, statistical regularities, but no breakthrough. Linguists propose theories. Perhaps it is a constructed language, perhaps a cipher layered upon another cipher, perhaps a phonetic script representing a lost tongue. Some even suggested it could be glossolalia, automatic writing without semantic meaning, but this, too, fails to satisfy. The manuscript is too orderly, too internally consistent, too carefully aligned with its illustrations. The drawings themselves refuse to be dismissed as decoration. Many plants appear to be composites, parts of real species rearranged into new forms. The astronomical diagrams show knowledge of cycles and motion. The human figures seem to illustrate processes rather than narratives, hinting at anatomy, medicine, or transformation over time. Theories multiplied. Some believe the manuscript is an encrypted medical or herbal text. Designed to conceal valuable knowledge from rivals, others argue it is an elaborate hoax and intellectual puzzle meant to impress wealthy patrons, but few suggest it is an alchemical work. Its true meaning hidden behind layers of symbol and metaphor. And then there are the more unsettling possibilities. Could the Voynich manuscript preserve knowledge from a forgotten tradition? A scientific system erased by time? A worldview entirely separate from the one that survived? Some have even suggested it reflects an intelligence operating beyond conventional human frameworks, not alien in origin, but alien in thought. Modern technology has only sharpened the mystery. Computer analysis reveals structure, repetition, predictability. Artificial intelligence models detect linguistic behavior consistent with real communication. And yet, no translation emerges, no sentence yields meaning. The manuscript remains closed, even as its pages are laid bare. Perhaps that is its true function. The Voynich manuscript exists at the boundary of understanding. It is neither nonsense nor knowledge we can grasp. It challenges our assumptions about communication, about history, about what it means to record information. Was it meant to be read? Or was it meant to endure unread? As the manuscript rests in its glass enclosure, illuminated softly by controlled light, its symbols remain unchanged. They do not age. They do not explain themselves. They wait, and maybe that is the point. Not every message is meant for its future. Not every truth survives translation. Some knowledge, once written, becomes a mirror reflecting only our desire to understand it. The Voynich manuscript does not speak, but it watches, and in its silence, it asks a question that has no answer yet. How much of our past lies not lost, but simply beyond our ability to read? The Nampa figurine, a human shape out of time, across the quiet plains of southern Idaho, near the small town of Nampa. The land stretches wide and unassuming. Fields roll gently into the distance. Rivers curve lazily through the earth. It is a landscape that seems firmly rooted in the familiar rhythms of the American West. Open, ordinary, and seemingly untouched by deep antiquity. Yet beneath this calm surface, something was waiting. In the late 19th century, during the excavation of a well, workers pulling sand and gravel from deep below the ground uncovered an object so small it could rest easily in the palm of a hand, barely over an inch tall. It appeared fragile, almost insignificant at first glance, but this tiny object would go on to challenge accepted timelines, provoke fierce debate, and quietly unsettle assumptions about the deep past of North America. It became known as the Nampa figurine. The figurine is made of fired clay and shaped into a humanoid form. Despite its diminutive size, the craftsmanship is unmistakable. The proportions are deliberate. The torso is balanced, the limbs are carefully formed, a head is distinct, with subtle contours that suggest facial features or perhaps the impression of clothing. There is nothing crude or accidental about it. It is the product of intention. What transformed this modest object into a historical anomaly was not its form but where it was found. According to contemporary reports, the figurine emerged from material drawn from a depth of approximately 300 feet below the surface. At the time, geologists believed those layers of compacted sand and gravel belonged to ancient geological formations, possibly hundreds of thousands of years old if accurate. This would place the figurine far earlier than any accepted human presence in the region, long before the arrival of Homo sapiens in North America. As currently understood, the implications were staggering. If a human-made figurine truly came from such depths, it would suggest either a dramatic error in geological interpretation or a history of human activity entirely unknown to us. Archaeologists and geologists immediately sought rational explanations. Some proposed that the figurine may have slipped downward through cracks or loose sediments over time. Others suggested contamination during drilling, or a misjudgment in the depth from which it was retrieved. These explanations are reasonable, they are necessary, and yet they have never fully silenced the unease surrounding the discovery. The figurine itself resists easy dismissal. Its surface bears no signs of modern manufacture. Its style does not neatly match known Native American traditions from the region, nor does it clearly resemble European folk artifacts of the 19th century. Some researchers have compared it to ancient fertility figures found in distant parts of the world, small symbolic representations of the human form used in ritual or spiritual contexts. But here, in the heart of Idaho, the figurine feels out of place. It stands alone. No tools were found with it, no settlement remains, no surrounding artifacts to provide context or confirmation, just a single human shape. Separated from explanation by layers of earth and uncertainty, the figurine raises deeper questions not only about age, but about memory. If it is ancient, who made it? What did it represent? Was it sacred, symbolic, personal, a simple act of creativity, or a fragment of a cultural language that no longer exists? If it is not ancient, if it somehow found its way into deeper layers through natural or human processes, then it becomes a reminder of how fragile archaeological interpretation can be. How easily assumptions are challenged by a single misplaced object. How much rests on context that can be disturbed, altered, or lost. And yet, the Nampa figurine endures. It has been examined, debated, photographed, and archived. Skeptics point to gaps in documentation and uncertainties in recovery. Supporters argue that not all anomalies can be neatly resolved without forcing the evidence to conform to expectation. Between these positions, the figurine occupies a quiet and resolved space. It is real, it exists, it has weight, texture, shape, and it refuses to explain itself, like a whisper carried up from the depths of time. The Nampa figurine reminds us that history is not always a clean line, that beneath ordinary landscapes, beneath familiar narratives, there may be traces of stories we no longer remember how to read. Perhaps it is nothing more than a geological curiosity, perhaps it is a misplaced artifact, or perhaps it is something else entirely. A small, silent challenge to the confidence with which we believe we know when humanity began, where it traveled, and what it chose to leave behind. The figurine sits quietly now, unassuming yet defiant, asking no questions but provoking many. And as we look upon its tiny human form, we are left with the same uneasy thought that follows so many unexplained relics. What if the past is deeper than we think? And what else might still be waiting, unseen, beneath our feet? The Vinland map, a world known to soon deep within the climate-controlled archives of Yale University, where light is softened and time itself seems to slow, rests a document that has unsettled historians for more than half a century. Among rows of fragile manuscripts and medieval parchments lies a map whose quiet presence carries a radical implication. It is known as the Vinland map at first glance. It appears modest, a medieval world map drawn on yellowed vellum. Its lines faint, its contours restrained. Europe, Africa, and parts of Asia merge in forms familiar to 15th century cartography. Nothing about it initially demands alarm, and yet, at its western edge, beyond the boundaries of the known medieval world, something extraordinary appears. The land labeled Vinland, if that name means what it seems to mean, then this map suggests that parts of North America were not only known to Europeans but mapped decades before Christopher Columbus set sail in 1492. The implication is as unsettling as it is tantalizing. It hints at a world where knowledge traveled further than official history allows, where stories of distant shores crossed oceans long before the age of discovery was meant to begin. The map first entered scholarly attention in the mid-20th century. Emerging alongside a collection of medieval texts, its earlier history remains frustratingly incomplete, marked by gaps that only deepen suspicion and intrigue. Radiocarbon dating of the vellum places its creation firmly in the 15th century, consistent with medieval materials. But a map is more than its parchment ink tells its own story. And it is here that certainty begins to fracture. Some analyses suggest thin lines with iron gall formulas used by medieval scribes. Other tests, however, have identified chemical elements that appear inconsistent with known inks of the period. Are these traces the result of later contamination, centuries of handling, environmental exposure, or do they point towards something more deliberate? A forgery, perhaps, or an alteration layered onto something older? Scientific investigation has brought both clarity and confusion. Ultraviolet imaging, spectroscopy, and microscopic analysis have revealed corrections, faint guidelines, and subtle adjustments made by the cartographer's hand. These details suggest careful composition rather than hurried deception. Yet they also refuse to settle the debate. Every test seems to answer one question while opening three more. The content of the map deepens the mystery. Vinland is not drawn flamboyantly or exaggerated. Its outline is restrained, almost cautious, marked with sparse annotations hinting at coastlines, rivers, and habitable land. It does not read like fantasy. It feels measured, observational. This has led some scholars to believe the map may have been created by someone with access to Norse accounts of transatlantic voyages. Viking sagas speak of lands west of Greenland. Archaeology has confirmed Norse presence at Land's Meadows in Newfoundland. Could such knowledge have filtered quietly into European scholarly circles, preserved not in chronicles but in maps? If so, why does no other medieval cartographic tradition clearly reflect this awareness? Why does Vinland appear here and seemingly nowhere else? Others argue the map is not a record of exploration, but an intellectual experiment, a synthesis of rumor, legend, and speculative geography, reflecting the medieval fascination with the edges of the known world. In this view, Vinland becomes less a destination and more a question mark drawn in ink. And then there are those who believe the map is a masterful deception, a forgery created with extraordinary skill, designed to exploit academic hope and historical longing. If so, it would be one of the most sophisticated hoaxes ever produced, crafted on genuine medieval vellum, executed with deliberate restraint, and capable of deceiving experts for decades. Yet even this explanation leaves discomfort behind. Forgeries usually shout. This map whispers. Its penmanship is calm, its geography cautious, its ambition strangely modest for a fraud of such magnitude beyond the technical debates. The Vinland map invites something deeper, reflection on how knowledge moves through time, how discoveries can be known, forgotten, dismissed, and then rediscovered centuries later, how history is not merely what happened, but what survived, what was believed, and what was allowed to endure. Perhaps the map records knowledge that existed briefly, flickered into awareness, and then faded as empires rose and fell. Perhaps it is a reminder that history is not linear, but layered, subject to loss, silence, and selective memory. Today, the Vinland map remains suspended between acceptance and doubt. It is neither fully authenticated nor conclusively dismissed. It occupies a liminal space, where evidence and imagination overlap, where certainty dissolves into possibility. As scholars continue to study its ink, its lines, its quiet defiance of easy explanation, the map does what the most powerful artifacts always do. It forces us to question not only the past, but our confidence in understanding it. What else might have been known before its time? What journeys were taken but never recorded? What truths were sketched, then erased by centuries of disbelief? In its careful rendering of distant shores, the Vinland map does not claim to answer these questions. It simply invites them, and in doing so, it reminds us that history is not finished speaking, only waiting for us to listen more closely. The Aiud aluminum wedge, a metal out of time in the rolling countryside near the town of Aiud, in Romania. The land appears ordinary at first glance. Fields stretch quietly beneath open skies. Work by generations of farmers who have long trusted the soil beneath their feet layer by layer. That soil has preserved the slow memory of time, and yet, in the summer of 1974, something emerged from the earth that did not belong to any familiar chapter of history. It was a small object, unassuming in size, but immense in implication. During routine excavation work, workers uncovered a wedge-shaped piece of metal buried deep beneath layers of compacted sediment. Nearby lay fossilized bones believed to belong to prehistoric elephant creatures that roamed the region hundreds of thousands of years ago. The object itself measured just over 13 centimeters in length, tapered at one end, smooth and symmetrical, its pale silver surface catching the light with an unfamiliar clarity. It was aluminum at first. The discovery seemed impossible. Aluminum, though abundant in the Earth's crust, does not occur naturally in a pure metallic form. It must be extracted from ore through complex industrial processes requiring high temperatures and advanced technology. Until the 19th century, humanity lacked the means to produce it at all. In fact, aluminum was once considered more valuable than gold. And yet here it was, seemingly sealed in ancient layers of earth. Initial geological assessments suggested that the sediment surrounding the object had accumulated over an immense span of time. If accurate, this would place the wedge far earlier than any known civilization capable of producing aluminum. The implication was staggering: a manufactured metal object where none should exist, a technology out of sequence. With history itself, closer examination only deepened the mystery. The wedge was not crude or irregular. Its edges were clean, its surfaces smooth. The tapering form suggested deliberate function rather than random formation. This was not a shard, nor a naturally fractured piece of metal. It appeared shaped and designed, a possibly machined. A metallurgical analysis revealed that the object was composed primarily of aluminum alloy, with trace elements. Microscopic inspection indicated signs of mechanical processing, marks consistent with cutting, smoothing, and shaping. Yet no known prehistoric tools could account for such work, and no cultural context existed to explain its presence. Predictably, mainstream explanations soon followed. Archaeologists cautioned that soil layers can be disturbed over time, flooding, erosion, seismic activity, and human interference can shift objects far from their original context. Or perhaps the wedge was a modern artifact that somehow migrated downward into older sediment. Perhaps the association with prehistoric bones was coincidental. Perhaps the dating was flawed. These explanations are reasonable, and yet none fully dissolve the unease surrounding the find. The reports from the excavation consistently describe the wedge as deeply embedded within compacted layers, not loosely mixed into disturbed soil. No modern machinery fragments were found nearby. No clear source explained how such an object could descend into ancient geological strata intact, and so the wedge lingered, caught between dismissal and wonder. Speculation filled the void left by uncertainty. Some proposed that the object was part of an unknown industrial process from the modern era, misidentified and misunderstood. Others ventured further, suggesting it could represent evidence of advanced metallurgical knowledge from a lost civilization, one erased by time, catastrophe, or the slow erosion of memory. More radical interpretations followed. Could it be a fragment of technology far older than history allows, a remnant of knowledge that rose and fell long before recorded civilization, or something not of human origin at all? Such ideas remain firmly outside conventional archaeology, yet they persist, not because they are proven, but because the object itself refuses to fit neatly into established frameworks. The Aiud aluminum wedge stands alone, no companion artifacts, no settlement remains, no inscriptions, just a single piece of shaped metal resting where it should not be. In this isolation lies its power. It forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about how we understand progress, about whether history unfolds in a simple, linear ascent, or whether knowledge can appear, vanish, and reappear across vast spans of time. It reminds us that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, only a reflection of what has survived. Today, the wedge remains a subject of quiet debate, studied, questioned, often dismissed, yet never entirely resolved, and perhaps that is where its true significance lies, not in proving a forgotten civilization, or rewriting the timeline of humanity, but in revealing the fragile boundaries of certainty itself and reminding us that the past is not a closed book, but a layered archive, one that occasionally yields objects that do not explain themselves. Aiud aluminum wedge does not speak. It does not claim a story, it simply exists, a small piece of metal, shaped with intent, resting between epochs, and in its silence, it asks us a question that history has never fully answered. What if we do not yet know everything we have already forgotten? The Dendera light and the reptilian figures of Ubaid, symbols at the edge of meaning along the gentle curve of the Nile, where the river has sustained life for thousands of years. The temple of Hathor at Dendera rises from the desert like a preserved echo of antiquity, its massive stone columns, celestial ceilings, and richly carved walls speak of devotion, ritual, and an intimate relationship between humanity and the divine. Every surface seems alive with symbolism, gods, stars, sacred animals, and the eternal rhythms of creation. And yet, among these familiar expressions of Egyptian cosmology, one relief continues to draw unusual attention. Carved into the stone ceiling of an inner chamber is a scene unlike any other. Elongated, bulb-shaped forms stretch outward from carved structures within them. Serpentine figures appear suspended, their bodies extending toward what looks like a cylindrical container supported by divine beings. To some observers, the image appears unsettlingly modern, resembling a glass bulb with a filament connected to a power source by something that looks like a cable. This carving has become known as the Dendera light to Egyptologists. The relief belongs firmly within the language of myth. The figures are understood as symbolic representations of creation. The serpent is Harsamthus, a manifestation of divine energy emerging from the lotus, a sacred symbol of rebirth and cosmic order. The bulb is not a device, but the womb of creation itself, the moment when life emerges from the primordial waters. The supporting pillar is a symbol of stability, endurance, and resurrection. Within this framework, nothing is technological, everything is metaphysical, and yet the form refuses to be ignored. The proportions are unusual. The enclosed serpent, the elongated enclosure of the apparent connection to a source when photographed and isolated from surrounding hieroglyphs. The relief triggers an unmistakable association in the modern mind, not because the ancient Egyptians understood electricity, but because the human brain is adept at pattern recognition, sometimes too adept. The debate surrounding the Dendera relief is less about whether ancient Egypt had light bulbs, and more about how meaning shifts across time. Are we projecting our technological worldview onto sacred art? Or did the ancient world encode layers of knowledge, cosmic, natural, symbolic, in ways we no longer fully understand? Egypt was not a primitive civilization, it was one of engineering, mathematics, medicine, and precise astronomical observation. Its monuments aligned with solstices, its calendars tracked celestial cycles, its symbolism often fused physical reality with spiritual abstraction. In such a culture, the boundary between metaphor and mechanism may not have been as rigid as it is today. The Dendera light remains unresolved, not because it proves advanced technology, but because it exposes the limits of interpretation itself. It stands at the intersection of ancient symbolism and modern imagination, asking not what the Egyptians knew but how we choose to see. And this tension between symbol and substance is not unique to Egypt. Thousands of kilometers away, In the ancient lands between the Tigris and Euphrates, another enigma emerges from the dust of early civilization in southern Mesopotamia. Archaeologists uncovered the remains of the Ubaid culture, a society that flourished more than 6,000 years ago. The Ubaid people were builders, farmers, and artisans. They lived in organized settlements, produced finely crafted pottery, and laid the foundations for what would later become Sumerian civilization. Among their artifacts, however, lies a series of objects that quietly unsettled expectations. Small clay figurines, diminutive in size yet unmistakably strange. These figures are humanoid, but not quite human. Their heads are elongated, their eyes almond-shaped and slanted, their bodies slender, sometimes scaled, sometimes smooth. Some appear female, depicted holding infants with the same reptilian features. Others stand upright, arms crossed, staring forward with an expression that feels deliberate rather than decorative. They are often referred to as the Ubaid lizard figurines from a conventional archaeological perspective. These objects are symbolic of fertility figures, protective charms, representations of mythological beings. Reptiles, in many ancient cultures, symbolized regeneration, transformation, and the liminal space between life and death. The careful crafting suggests ritual importance rather than casual artistry. And yet, he figures do not resemble known animals of the region. Their anatomy appears consistent across multiple examples. The proportions are repeated, the features intentional. Some figurines show articulation in limbs or jaws, implying movement or function. They are not chaotic fantasies, but coherent forms. This coherence has fueled speculation. Were these figures purely symbolic, shaped by imagination and belief? Or were they inspired by something observed? Real creatures, remembered beings, or mythic archetypes passed down through generations? Could they represent a lost symbolic language, one whose meaning has eroded beyond recognition? What complicates the question further is their archaeological context. Many were found in ritual deposits, embedded beneath floors or within foundations, as if placed deliberately to anchor a space. Some were broken intentionally, others show signs of repair, firing, and reuse. These were not disposable objects, they mattered. Scientific analysis confirms their authenticity. The clay, the firing methods, the stratigraphy all place them firmly within the Ubaid period, but science cannot tell us what the makers believed when they shaped them. It cannot explain why these forms recur, or what stories they once carried, like the relief at Dendera. The Ubaid figurines exist in a liminal zone between explanation and mystery. They remind us that ancient cultures did not divide the world neatly into categories of myth and reality. Symbol and observation often merged, the sacred and the natural overlapped. What we interpret as strange may have been perfectly intelligible within a worldview now lost. And so these artifacts endure not as proof of forgotten technologies or hidden beings, but as mirrors reflecting the complexity of early human thought. They challenge us not by offering answers, but by revealing how much meaning can vanish when context is stripped away by time. The Dendera light and the Ubaid figurines whisper the same quiet truth. History is not only what happened, it is what was understood. And some understandings, once lost, leave behind forms that no longer speak clearly, only suggest. They wait patiently at the edge of certainty, reminding us that the past is deeper, stranger, and far less settled than we often assume. The Ubaid lizard figurines echoes from the dawn of civilization in the arid plains of southern Mesopotamia, where the rivers Tigris and Euphrates carved life into an otherwise unforgiving landscape. The foundations of human civilization were first laid here, between fertile floodplains and open desert. The Ubaid culture flourished roughly between 5000 and 4000 BC, Long before written history began to record human thought, the Ubaid people are remembered for their elegant pottery, early architectural planning, and the emergence of complex social organization. Their settlements reveal careful design, ritual spaces, and an advanced understanding of communal life, yet among the bowls, tools, and familiar votive objects left behind, archaeologists uncovered something profoundly unsettling: small clay figurines whose forms do not easily fit within the known world of ancient Mesopotamia. These objects are known today as the Ubaid lizard figurines. At first glance, they are modest in size, usually only a few centimeters tall, but their impact far exceeds their scale. Crafted from fired clay and colored in muted reddish-brown tones, each figurine is shaped with remarkable precision. Limbs are elongated and deliberate, tails curved naturally, heads are narrow, often elongated, with almond-shaped eyes that seem alert, almost watchful. Some figures display what appear to be jointed limbs or articulated jaws, an astonishing level of anatomical attention for objects created more than 6,000 years ago. These are not crude or abstract forms, they are coherent, intentional, and consistent across multiple finds, and they do not resemble ordinary animals. The figurines depict humanoid bodies fused with reptilian features. Some appear almost upright, standing in poses that suggest awareness or authority. Others depict female forms holding infants that share the same reptilian characteristics. The imagery is striking, intimate, and deeply strange. Their discovery raises immediate questions. Many of the figurines were found within domestic spaces or ritual contexts, buried beneath floors or embedded within foundations. They were not casually discarded. They were placed. Some were deliberately broken, others refired, repaired, or altered, suggesting continued interaction long after their initial creation. This was not decoration, this was engagement. For decades, scholars have debated their meaning from a conventional archaeological perspective. The figurines are interpreted as symbolic objects, perhaps fertility icons, protective talismans, or representations of mythological beings. Reptiles, after all, have long held symbolic significance in ancient cultures, often associated with regeneration, transformation, and the hidden forces of nature. The Ubaid people were deeply spiritual. Ritual behavior permeated daily life. Within this framework, the lizard-like forms could represent abstract spiritual concepts rather than literal creatures, and yet the precision remains difficult to dismiss. The anatomy of these figures is unusually consistent. Scales, proportions, and joint placement appear intentional rather than fantastical. The forms are not exaggerated in the way mythical creatures often are. Instead, they feel observed, studied, remembered. No known local species perfectly matches these depictions. This has led to more speculative interpretations. Could the figurines reflect cultural memory, representations of creatures that once existed but are now extinct? Could they be symbolic hybrids, combining human and animal traits to convey ideas of transformation, power, or divine intermediaries? Or do they preserve something even more elusive, a worldview in which the boundary between human and animal was perceived differently than it is today? Some researchers suggest the figurines may encode knowledge, mythological, ecological, or anatomical, through form rather than text. In a world without writing, meaning was carried through shape, gesture, and repetition. These figures may have functioned as teaching tools, ritual anchors, or narrative objects whose stories were spoken, not written. A scientific analysis confirms their authenticity. The clay composition, firing methods, and stratigraphic layers all place them firmly within the Ubaid period. Modern imaging reveals microscopic details invisible to the naked eye: fine scale textures, subtle shaping of joints, and deliberate surface patterns. These were made by skilled hands, yet skill alone does not explain intention. The Ubaid lizard figurines exist at a threshold between symbol and observation, between ritual and representation. They are undeniably real artifacts, held today in museum collections, catalogued and measured, and yet they resist final interpretation. They ask unsettling questions. Were they purely symbolic? Or do they reflect a way of seeing the world that no longer survives? Did the Ubaid people imagine these forms, or did they observe something that later generations forgot? Were these figures meant to be understood literally, spiritually, or in ways that language itself cannot preserve? The figurines do not answer. They simply remain small, silent, watchful. They remind us that the earliest civilizations may have understood reality through lenses far different from our own, blending myth, observation, and meaning into forms that still speak if only we knew how to listen. And perhaps that is their true power, not to prove hidden truths, but to expose how much of the ancient world remains beyond our reach, waiting patiently beneath layers of earth and time, challenging our certainty about what humanity has always known. The Los Lunas Decalogue stone, the commandment carved in silence, hidden on the side of a low mesa near the town of Los Lunas, New Mexico. A massive boulder rises quietly from the desert floor. Its surface has been shaped by centuries of sun, wind, and drifting sand, darkened by time and weathered into stillness. At first glance, it appears no different from countless other stones scattered across the arid landscape. But upon closer inspection, something extraordinary reveals itself. Etched deeply into the rock surface is a series of carefully carved inscriptions, angular, deliberate, unmistakable in form. These markings are not random scratches, nor are they casual graffiti. They resemble ancient Hebrew characters, arranged in lines that closely mirror the Ten Commandments. This enigmatic monument is known as the Los Lunas Decalogue stone. The boulder itself measures roughly 2 meters across, its face cracked and pitted by natural erosion, yet the inscriptions remain remarkably clear. Each character is deeply incised, aligned with precision, suggesting both skill and intention. This was not a hurried act. Carving such text into solid stone would have required time, effort, and a deep familiarity with both the script and its sacred content. The scale alone raises immediate questions. Why carve such a monumental text here, in this isolated place, far from known centers of ancient literacy? And who possessed the knowledge to do so? The inscription closely parallels the biblical Decalogue, as recorded in the Old Testament. Even more striking is the script itself. Scholars have identified it as Paleo-Hebrew, an archaic form of Hebrew used by ancient Israelites and largely replaced by square Aramaic script more than 2,000 years ago. This specificity has fueled intense debate. If the inscription is genuinely ancient, it would imply knowledge of Hebrew scripture and writing long before any confirmed contact between the Old World and the Americas. Conventional history offers no easy answers. According to accepted timelines, European contact with North America did not occur until the late 15th century, while Jewish communities existed throughout Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. There is no verified evidence of Hebrew-speaking travelers reaching the interior of North America in antiquity. And yet, here in the New Mexican desert, the commandments appear carved into stone, echoing the biblical image of Moses receiving the law on Mount Sinai. Mainstream archaeologists urge caution. One widely held explanation is that the stone may be a modern or early modern creation. Perhaps it was carved by a settler, scholar, or traveler familiar with biblical texts, intentionally choosing an ancient script to evoke mystery or devotion. Others suggest it could be the work of a religious individual seeking to reenact sacred history in a symbolic landscape reminiscent of the Old Testament wilderness. Geological analysis complicates the matter. While the boulder itself is undeniably ancient, dating the inscriptions precisely is extremely difficult. Desert environments can preserve carvings far longer than humid climates, and erosion does not progress at a uniform rate. Some experts argue the weathering of the letters suggests considerable age. Others maintain that similar effects could occur over just a few centuries. The location adds another layer of intrigue. The stone sits on a flat, exposed face of the mesa. Visible yet secluded, it is not hidden, but neither is it placed along a major trail or settlement site. Its placement feels intentional, as though the message was meant to endure quietly rather than attract immediate attention, a monument not for crowds, but for time itself. A symbolism looms large in interpretation. The act of carving the Ten Commandments into stone is deeply resonant within Judeo-Christian tradition. Was this a declaration of faith, a spiritual offering, or a deliberate echo of the biblical narrative itself? If the inscription was meant as a sacred act, its isolation could be part of its meaning. A solitary testament carved into the wilderness. Beyond conventional explanations lie more speculative theories. Some suggest the stone is evidence of ancient transoceanic contact, proposing that travelers from the Near East may have reached the Americas long before Columbus, or even the Vikings. Others imagine lost voyages, secret migrations, or fragments of history erased by time. These ideas challenge established narratives and remain firmly outside mainstream scholarship. Yet they persist because the stone itself resists easy dismissal. A scientific study has confirmed one thing with certainty: the inscription is human-made. Detailed photographs, rubbings, and digital analyses reveal consistent carving depth, controlled line work, and variations that indicate deliberate hand craftsmanship rather than natural formation. What remains elusive is the when, the why, and the who of the Los Lunas Decalogue stone stands as a quiet provocation. It bridges continents, languages, and belief systems. It invites reflection on the movement of ideas, the endurance of faith, and the possibility that history is more fragmented than linear. The stone does not speak. It does not explain itself. It simply remains, etched into desert rock, absorbing sunlight by day and shadows by night, bearing words that have shaped civilizations across millennia. As one traces the ancient characters with the eye, another question inevitably emerges: is this a relic of forgotten journeys, a symbolic act of devotion, or a carefully crafted mystery left for future generations to debate? Perhaps the true significance of the Los Lunas Decalogue stone lies not in what it proves, but in what it forces us to consider: that history is not always complete, that knowledge travels in unexpected ways, and that sometimes the past leaves behind questions rather than answers, waiting patiently beneath open skies and endless time. The crystal skulls, faces carved from silence deep within the humid jungles of Central America. Among the moss-covered ruins of once great civilizations, there exists a group of objects that have unsettled historians and captivated the imagination for more than a century. They are known simply as the crystal skulls. At first sight, they are impossible to ignore. Human skulls carved entirely from clear or milky quartz, smooth and luminous, yet rendered with astonishing anatomical precision. The eye sockets are hollow and expressive. The jawlines are articulated with delicate accuracy. The curvature of the cranium follows the proportions of a real human skull so closely that the objects feel less like sculptures and more like preserved presences. They seem ancient, yet timeless, beautiful, yet unsettling, as if the stone itself remembers something it cannot say. Among the most famous is the Mitchell Hedges skull, long surrounded by controversy and conflicting stories. According to legend, it was discovered in the early 20th century during an excavation at a pre-Columbian site, often associated with Maya ruins, yet no clear excavation records existing dates, locations, and witnesses vary depending on the account. The skull appears suddenly in history, already complete, already extraordinary. Other crystal skulls reside in museums and private collections across the world, reportedly originating from regions of present-day Mexico, Guatemala, and Belize. Regardless of provenance, their craftsmanship is undeniable. Quartz is one of the hardest natural materials known, Ranking high on the Mohs scale, it fractures easily and resists shaping even today. Carving flawless symmetry from quartz requires advanced tools, patience, and precision. This raises the central question: how were these skulls made? Scientific analysis has yielded unsettling results under modern microscopy. Researchers have identified fine striations and polishing marks inconsistent with ancient stone tools in some cases. The patterns suggest the use of rotary instruments and industrial abrasives, techniques that became common only in the last few centuries. These findings have led many scholars to conclude that the skulls are modern creations, possibly carved in Europe during the 19th century, inspired by indigenous iconography and later misattributed to ancient cultures. And yet, the mystery does not fully dissolve even with modern equipment. Carving a skull from a single piece of quartz without cracking it requires extraordinary skill. The symmetry, balance, and anatomical accuracy remain difficult to replicate. The skulls are not crude imitations, they are masterworks. Historically, skull symbolism holds deep meaning in Mesoamerican cultures. Among the Maya and Aztecs, the skull represented death and rebirth, sacrifice and renewal, the eternal cycle of life. The skulls appeared in temples, ritual carvings, and sacred art, not as symbols of fear, but as gateways between worlds. Could the crystal skulls have served a similar purpose? Some propose they were ceremonial objects, used in rituals or rites of passage. Others suggest they were symbolic representations of ancestral wisdom, physical embodiments of knowledge passed from generation to generation. The choice of quartz, a material associated across cultures with clarity, vision, and transformation, only deepens the intrigue beyond academic interpretation. More speculative theories have flourished. Some believe the skulls possess metaphysical properties, claiming they can store information, amplify energy, or act as conduits between consciousness and matter. Others suggest they are remnants of lost technologies, artifacts of civilizations far more advanced than we currently acknowledge. Fringe theories go further still, proposing extraterrestrial influence or non-human intelligence guiding their creation. There is no scientific evidence to support these claims, but the persistence of such beliefs reveals something important. The skulls evoke a powerful psychological response. Humans are neurologically attuned to faces. We seek meaning in symmetry. We sense awareness where there may be none. When those instincts meet full as stone shaped into human form, the result is profound unease. Many who have encountered the skulls describe a strange sensation, a feeling of being observed, an awareness that is difficult to rationalize. Whether this reaction arises from imagination, suggestion, or something deeper remains unknown, but the response itself is real. Mainstream archaeology remains cautious. The lack of reliable excavation data, combined with evidence of modern tooling, has led most scholars to classify the crystal skulls as relatively recent creations. And yet, even this explanation feels incomplete. It does not explain why these objects continue to inspire reverence, obsession, and unease across cultures and generations. Why do they endure in our collective imagination? Perhaps because they exist at the intersection of art and mystery, between science and symbolism, between what we can prove and what we feel. The crystal skulls remind us that objects do not need to be ancient to be powerful, nor do they need to be supernatural to provoke awe. Sometimes, human craftsmanship alone is enough to blur the boundary between history and myth, displayed beneath museum lights or resting silently in private collections. The skulls catch and refract light in subtle ways. Their translucent surfaces glow softly, their hollow eyes remain fixed and blinking. They offer no answers, only questions. Who created them? For what purpose? Were they meant to deceive, to inspire, to commemorate, or to preserve something intangible? Are they relics of forgotten belief systems, modern interpretations of ancient symbolism, or something that exists entirely outside our categories? The crystal skulls do not reveal their story. They simply remain a perfect, silent watching hand. In their stillness, they remind us that some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only contemplated. The Dorchester iron vessel would tool out of time in the quiet streets of Dorchester, Massachusetts, not far from the modern pulse of a city shaped by centuries of human presence. There exists an artifact so modest in appearance that it would be easy to overlook. It does not glitter, it bears no ornate symbols. It is not carved with sacred imagery or fashioned from precious stone. It is a simple iron pot, roughly 6 inches in diameter, small enough to rest comfortably into hands. The vessel appears entirely ordinary, its surface is darkened by age, its form is practical, almost austere, with a slight lip along the rim, and no decorative elements whatsoever to the casual observer. It resembles the kind of utilitarian object once common in kitchens and workshops across the 19th century, and yet its existence has unsettled archaeologists and historians for more than a century. The mystery lies not in what the pot is, but in where it was found in the mid-19th century. Workers excavating gravel near a stream bank in Dorchester reportedly uncovered the iron vessel embedded deep within compacted clay, sand, and glacial debris, according to contemporary accounts. The pot was encased in hardened sediment alongside stones deposited by retreating glaciers. The depth and composition of the surrounding layers suggested an age far older than European settlement in North America. This immediately raised a troubling question. How could a forged iron object, manufactured using techniques associated with relatively recent metallurgy, be found beneath geological layers believed to be thousands of years old? Iron is not a forgiving material. It does not occur naturally in a pure, workable form. To shape it into a vessel requires controlled heat, forging knowledge, and tools capable of sustaining high temperatures. In North America, widespread ironworking did not begin until the arrival of European settlers. Indigenous cultures, while highly skilled in stone, copper, and organic materials, are not known to have produced forged iron vessels, and yet there the pot was mainstream. Archaeology approaches the Dorchester iron vessel with understandable caution. One explanation suggests that the object is not ancient at all, but rather a relatively modern artifact that migrated downward through the soil over time. Erosion, frost heave, flooding, burrowing animals, and human disturbance can all disrupt stratigraphy, creating the illusion that an object belongs to a deeper, older layer than it truly does. Another possibility is misrecording. 19th century excavation practices lacked the precision of modern archaeological methods. Depth measurements, sediment descriptions, and contextual details were often estimated rather than documented systematically. A simple error in observation could transform an ordinary find into an apparent anomaly. These explanations are reasonable, and yet they do not entirely dissolve the unease. The Dorchester pot belongs to a small but persistent category of discoveries sometimes referred to as out of place artifacts, objects that appear technologically inconsistent with the layers in which they are found. Across both North America and Europe, similar cases surface periodically. Tools, vessels, or work materials discovered in contexts that seem to predate their known technological development. Most are eventually explained, some are not. Scientific analysis of the Dorchester vessel confirms that it is composed of workable iron, shaped deliberately rather than naturally formed. Beyond that, the trail grows cold and no maker's mark, no associated tools, no settlement remains nearby to anchor it to a specific culture or moment in time. The object stands alone, stripped of context, severed from the story that would explain it. This absence is what gives the pot its power. Speculative interpretations inevitably rise in the space left by uncertainty. Some imagine the vessel as evidence of forgotten experimentation. Indigenous metallurgists whose knowledge was lost before it could spread. Others suggest pre-Columbian contact with ironworking civilizations, an idea that, if proven, would profoundly alter our understanding of global interaction before the modern era. More imaginative theories go further still, proposing vanished cultures, erased histories, or technological knowledge that emerged and disappeared without leaving a broader trace. These ideas remain unproven and, in many cases, implausible, but they persist because the object itself resists easy dismissal. What makes the Dorchester pot especially compelling is its ordinariness. It is not ceremonial, it is not symbolic, it is a tool. A vessel made for use. Its simplicity suggests daily life rather than myth or ritual. And it is precisely this quality that makes its presence so disruptive. Ornate artifacts invite imagination, ordinary ones demand explanation. Why would such a practical object be buried so deeply, so thoroughly, beneath layers that appear to predate its technology? Archaeological study of the pot is necessarily restrained, with no precise documentation of its original deposition, and more than a century having passed since its discovery. Definitive conclusions may be forever out of reach. Yet the limitations of evidence do not erase the questions, they sharpen them. The Dorchester iron vessel stands as a reminder that history is not a seamless narrative, but a mosaic assembled from fragments, assumptions, and incomplete records. It reveals how much depends on context, and how easily context can be lost as one contemplates the dark and adorned surface of the pot. It becomes impossible not to imagine the hands that shaped it and the fire that heated the iron, the purpose it once served, for the moment it was buried. Whether by accident or intent, or was it dropped, displaced, forgotten? Or does it belong to a chapter of human history we have yet to recognize? The Dorchester pot does not answer these questions. It offers no inscription, no date, no explanation. It remains silent, and in that silence, it reminds us of something essential, that the past is not fully mapped, that certainty is fragile, and that beneath familiar ground, even in places we think we understand, there may still lie objects capable of unsettling everything we think we know about time, technology, and the long and finished story of humanity. The Codex Rohonczi, a language that refuses to speak, hidden among the quiet stacks of a European library. There exists a manuscript that seems to watch rather than be read at first glance. The Codex Rohonczi appears in remarkable, a bound volume of aged pages. Its parchment yellowed by centuries, its ink softened by time. It looks like any other medieval manuscript, the kind scholars have catalogued and studied for generations. But this impression lasts only moments. The closer look reveals that nothing about this book is ordinary. Every page is densely filled with a strange and intricate script, composed of symbols, and like any known alphabet, the characters flow in deliberate lines, evenly spaced, consistent in form, as though governed by strict grammatical rules. And yet, despite decades of study, no one has been able to read a single sentence with certainty. The language remains silent, locked behind symbols that refuse to yield meaning. Interwoven with this indecipherable text are illustrations, carefully drawn scenes of human figures, soldiers engaged in battle, religious ceremonies, architectural structures, and moments of apparent ritual significance. These images feel familiar and unsettling at once. They echo medieval Europe and their themes. Yet something about them feels displaced, as though they belong to a culture just beyond the edge of recorded history. The Codex Rohonczi first entered documented history in the early 19th century, when it surfaced in what is now Hungary. In the town of Rohonczi, from which it takes its name, where it came from before that moment is unknown. There are no records of its creation, no mention in monastic inventories, number references in royal or ecclesiastical archives. It appears suddenly, already old, already complete, already mysterious. The manuscript contains more than 400 pages, an astonishing volume for a work whose purpose remains entirely unclear. This is not a casual notebook or a private journal. It is the product of sustained effort, time, and discipline. The consistency of the script suggests a trained hand, perhaps even multiple revisions before committing ink to parchment. Whoever created it did not intend it to be random. And that is what makes the Codex Rohonczi so unsettling. Linguists have searched for parallels. The script does not match Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Arabic, or any known medieval European writing system, it does not align with known Asian scripts. Nor does it resemble runes or proto-alphabets. Some characters repeat frequently, others appear rarely, suggesting structure rather than chaos. The text flows in a consistent direction, and the layout follows clear rules, implying syntax, grammar, and intention. Yet meaning remains elusive. Cryptographers have tried to break it as a cipher. Frequency analysis reveals patterns consistent with language, not random invention. Statistical modeling suggests internal coherence, and still, every proposed translation collapses under scrutiny. Each breakthrough dissolves into ambiguity. The Codex behaves like a lock that turns, but never opens. Mainstream scholars often approach the manuscript cautiously. Some suggest it may be an elaborate hoax, a clever construction designed to impress or deceive. Others argue it could be a private code, a personal encryption system used by an individual or group to conceal sensitive information. But even these explanations struggle to account for the sheer scale of the work. A hoax of this magnitude would require extraordinary dedication for no clear reward. The illustrations complicate matters further. They depict battles, yet no clearly identifiable armies, religious rituals, yet no unmistakable saints or deities, buildings that resemble churches and fortifications, but with unfamiliar proportions and details. In some images, symbols appear alongside figures, as though the text and illustration are meant to be read together, forming a narrative that remains just beyond reach. Are these images clues, or are they simply reinforcing a meaning known only to the creator? Over time, more speculative interpretations have emerged, as some propose that the Codex preserves a lost language, perhaps belonging to a forgotten community erased by war, migration, or assimilation. Others imagine it as the product of a secret society, encoding spiritual or philosophical knowledge intended only for initiates. But few go further still, suggesting the manuscript reflects ideas or influences that fall outside conventional history. None of these theories can be proven. What can be proven is that the Codex Rohonczi is real. The parchment is authentic, the ink is old, the craftsmanship is deliberate. This is not a modern fabrication pretending to be ancient. It is a genuine artifact whose meaning has slipped beyond our grasp. The material quality of the manuscript only deepens the mystery. The parchment is durable, the ink remarkably preserved, the symbols are carefully aligned, the spacing precise, the structure methodical. This was not the work of a distracted mind. It was planned, designed, executed with purpose, and yet the purpose is lost. The Codex Rohonczi stands as a quiet reminder of how fragile understanding can be. We often assume that with enough time, enough technology, and enough intelligence, every mystery will eventually yield. But some artifacts resist us, not because we lack tools, but because we lack context. The world that gave birth to this manuscript may no longer exist in any form we recognize. As the pages sit in silence, filled with symbols that once meant something to someone, they challenge us to confront the limits of interpretation. Language, after all, is a bridge between minds across time. When that bridge collapses, meaning vanishes, even when the words remain. Who wrote this manuscript, and why? Was it a record of history, belief, or knowledge now erased? A personal creation never meant to be understood by outsiders, or a deliberate puzzle designed to outlive its maker and haunt future generations with unanswered questions. The Codex Rohonczi does not respond, it simply waits. A book that exists, yet cannot be read, a voice preserved, yet unheard, a reminder that history is not only what we remember, but also what we have forgotten, and that some secrets may remain hidden not because they are guarded, but because the key itself has been lost to time. The Tri-Lobed disk of Sabu geometry from the dawn of civilization. In the quiet, dimly lit halls of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, surrounded by colossal statues, gilded sarcophagi, and relics of divine kingship. There rests a small object that rarely commands attention at first glance. It does not gleam with gold, it bears no inscriptions praising gods or pharaohs, and yet it has puzzled archaeologists for nearly a century. This is the Tri-Lobed disc of Sabu, and like the monumental artifacts that dominate the museum, the disc is deceptively modest, carved from schist, a fragile and brittle stone. It measures roughly 60 centimeters in diameter. Its form is strikingly unusual, a flat circular disc interrupted by 3 perfectly symmetrical lobes radiating from a central hub. The shape feels precise, deliberate, almost engineered. Nothing like it exists elsewhere in ancient Egyptian material culture. The disc was discovered in the tomb of Sabu, a high-ranking official of Egypt's first dynasty, dating back more than 5,000 years to the very dawn of dynastic civilization. This alone makes the object extraordinary. Of the first dynasty marks the emergence of organized state power, writing, monumental architecture, and ritual tradition. Most objects from this period are simple by later standards: pottery, stone vessels, ceremonial tools, jewelry, and yet among them lay this. The craftsmanship of the disc is remarkable. Each lobe is evenly curved, balanced with mathematical precision. The central opening is smooth and carefully shaped, suggesting it was meant to fit onto something else, perhaps a shaft or axis. The stone surface is finely worked, its edges thinned in a way that pushes the limits of what schist can withstand without breaking. This is not casual stonework. Archaeologists have long struggled to classify the object. It does not resemble a plate, a bowl, or a vessel. It does not fit comfortably into known categories of ritual equipment, and its shape appears too complex, too intentional, to be merely decorative. Mainstream interpretations tend toward caution, as some scholars suggest the disc may have served a symbolic or ritual purpose, perhaps representing cosmic order, cycles of time, or sacred geometry. Ancient Egypt was deeply symbolic, and abstract forms were often used to express metaphysical ideas rather than practical functions. Others have proposed that the disc could have been an experimental object, possibly linked to craftsmanship or early industrial processes. Suggestions range from a stand or support structure to a component used in stoneworking, metallurgy, or textiles, yet no definitive evidence supports these theories, and the fragility of schist raises further doubts. Any functional use involving rotation, force, or weight would risk shattering the object, and still, the geometry remains difficult to ignore. The 3-lobe design is balanced in a way that feels mechanical. Some engineers who have studied replicas note that the disc could theoretically function as a rotating component, capable of distributing force evenly around a central axis. To modernize, it resembles a flywheel, rotor, or even a primitive turbine element. Such interpretations are controversial. They imply a level of abstract mechanical thinking that conventional Egyptology does not attribute to the first dynasty. No other machines from this period have survived. No texts describe such devices, and yet the disc exists, carved with precision that feels ahead of its time. This tension between what we expect and what we see is what makes the Tri-Lobed disc of Sabu so compelling. Beyond questions of function lies the question of intent. Sabu was an elite official, and elite tombs were curated with care. Objects placed within them were chosen deliberately, often believed to carry protective power, symbolic meaning, or practical value for the afterlife. Why include this disc? Was it a sacred object, imbued with metaphysical significance, a symbol of balance, motion, or cosmic order? Or was it something more practical, a fragment of knowledge or experimentation that never fully entered the historical record? Speculative theories have flourished over the decades, as some enthusiasts argue the disc represents evidence of forgotten engineering traditions, early attempts to understand mechanics that were later abandoned or lost. Others see it as purely symbolic, a visual expression of abstract concepts rather than a tool meant to be used. What science can confirm is limited but important. A disc is authentic. The material matches stone sources used in early dynastic Egypt. Tool marks align with known carving techniques of the period. There is no indication of modern fabrication or later intrusion, and yet, no inscription explains it. No parallel object contextualizes it, the disc stands alone. This absence of explanation is what transforms the object from a curiosity into a mystery. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable truth that archaeology does not always provide answers. Sometimes it only preserves questions. The Tri-Lobed disc of Sabu feels less like an artifact and more like a message without words. Its elegance is quiet, its form is restrained, and yet it resists every attempt to confine it to familiar categories. It reminds us that early civilizations were not merely primitive ancestors fumbling toward progress. They were thinkers, experimenters, observers of patterns and principles. They explored geometry, symmetry, and abstraction in ways that still surprise us as one traces the curves of the disc today. Imagining the hands that carved it with stone tools and patience, it becomes clear that some knowledge does not survive through texts or monuments. Sometimes it survives only as form. What was this object meant to do? What idea did it embody? Was it ritual, function, or something that straddled both? The Tri-Lobed disc of Sabu does not answer, it simply endures. A quiet fragment from the dawn of civilization, reminding us that even in humanity's earliest chapters, there are ideas we have yet to fully understand, and questions still waiting to be asked. The Tri-Lobed disc of Sabu, a question carved in stone in the dimly lit corridors of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, surrounded by relics of pharaohs and artifacts thousands of years old, rests a small object that has quietly perplexed scholars since the moment it was unearthed. It is known as the Tri-Lobed disc of Sabu, and like the towering statues, gilded coffins, and intricately carved reliefs that dominate the museum's halls, this artifact appears modest at first glance. It is a stone disc, carved from fragile schist, measuring roughly 61 centimeters in diameter. 3 perfectly symmetrical lobes radiate outward from a carefully shaped central hub. Its form is immediately striking. Nothing else like it exists in the archaeological record of ancient Egypt. And yet, this unusual object was discovered in the tomb of Sabu, a high-ranking official of Egypt's first dynasty, dating back more than 5,000 years to the dawn of organized civilization. This alone makes the disc extraordinary. The first dynasty marks the emergence of centralized power, writing, ritual tradition, and monumental architecture. Most objects from this period are functional or symbolic in familiar ways: pottery vessels, stone tools, ceremonial items, jewelry, but this disc stands apart. The craftsmanship is remarkable. Each lobe is evenly curved and precisely proportioned. The central opening is smooth and deliberate, as if designed to fit onto an axis or shaft. The stone surface is finely worked, its edges thin to a degree that pushes the limits of what brittle schist can withstand without fracturing. This was not careless stonework, it was intentional. Archaeologists have long struggled to categorize the object. It does not resemble known funerary offerings or ceremonial tools from the period. There are no inscriptions to explain its purpose, no parallel artifacts to provide context. Its shape defies conventional classification. Mainstream interpretations tend toward caution. Some scholars suggest the disc may have served a symbolic or ritual role, perhaps representing cosmic order, cycles of life, or sacred geometry. Ancient Egyptian culture was deeply symbolic, and abstract forms often carried metaphysical meaning rather than practical function. Others have proposed that the disc may have been an experimental object, possibly connected to craftsmanship such as woodworking, metallurgy, or textiles. The shallow grooves along its surface hint that it may not have been purely decorative. Yet this interpretation raises further questions. Schist is a fragile material. Any functional use involving rotation, force, or repeated stress would risk breaking the disc. This makes its precise geometry even more puzzling. Why carve such an intricate form from such a delicate stone? What draws the most attention, however, is the disc's geometric sophistication. The three lobes are not merely decorative. Their symmetry suggests an understanding of balance and proportion that feels surprisingly modern. Some researchers have noted that the disc could theoretically function as a mechanical component, fitting into a larger apparatus, rotating around a central axis, or distributing force in a controlled way, similar to pulleys or rotors. Such interpretations are controversial. They imply a level of abstract mechanical thinking that conventional Egyptology does not attribute to the First Dynasty. No machines from this period have survived. No texts describe such devices, and yet, the object exists, carved with precision that resists simple explanation. This tension between expectation and evidence is what makes the Tri-Lobed disc of Sabu so compelling. Beyond questions of function lies a deeper question of intent. Sabu was an elite official, and elite tombs were curated with care. Objects placed within them were chosen to ensure power, protection, and continuity in the afterlife. Why include this disc? Was it a sacred object, a talisman, or a vessel of metaphysical significance? Or was it a fragment of practical knowledge, encoded in stone for reasons now lost to time? Could it represent an abandoned line of experimentation, a tradition that never fully entered the historical record? Speculative theories have flourished, as some suggest the disc was part of an advanced mechanical device, perhaps even an early rotary component, hinting at technological ideas far ahead of what we expect from this era. Others see the form as purely symbolic, representing celestial cycles, balance, or cosmic harmony. Science confirms only a few things with certainty. The disc is authentic. The stone matches materials available during the First Dynasty. Microscopic analysis reveals tool marks consistent with early Egyptian stoneworking techniques, and yet its purpose remains unknown. Unlike inscriptions or written records that offer explanation, the Tri-Lobed disc of Sabu provides only its form. It challenges modern observers to infer meaning without guidance, making it both tangible and elusive. Familiar and unknowable, its quiet elegance is matched by its ability to provoke thought. The three-lobed shape is orderly, balanced, and precise, yet deeply enigmatic. It feels less like an object and more like a question carved in stone. The Tri-Lobed disc of Sabu is not merely an artifact. It is a conversation across millennia, a silent challenge to our assumptions about early civilization. A reminder that ingenuity does not always leave written explanations behind. As we trace the curves of its lobes and imagine the hands that shaped it 5,000 years ago, we are forced to confront a humbling truth. Some mysteries endure not because they are unsolved, but because they were never meant to explain themselves. What knowledge was encoded in this stone? Was it ritual, function, or something that blurred the boundary between both? The Tri-Lobed disc of Sabu does not answer. It simply waits, inviting wonder, reflection, and the unsettling realization that even at the very beginning of human civilization, there were ideas we may still not fully understand. The Shigur idol, the voice from the deep past, deep within the remote Ural Mountains of Russia, where dense forests stretch endlessly and peat bogs preserve traces of vanished worlds. A remarkable artifact stands at the edge of human memory. It is known as the Shigur idol. Unlike the familiar stone monuments of ancient civilizations, this colossal figure is carved entirely from wood, and yet, in age, complexity, and symbolic power, it surpasses many of the monuments that dominate our historical imagination. The idol was carved from larch wood and originally stood nearly 5 meters tall. Its elongated surface is covered with intricate geometric motifs, zigzag patterns, chevrons, and abstract symbols. Stylized human-like faces emerge along its length, their wide eyes and rigid expressions staring outward. as if observing a world far removed from their own, discovered in a peat bog in 1890. The Shiger idol is one of the oldest known wooden sculptures on Earth. Radiocarbon dating places its creation at approximately 11,600 years ago, making it nearly twice as old as the pyramids of Egypt, at a time when human societies were emerging from the last ice age, long before cities, writing, or agriculture as we know them. This monumental work already existed at first glance. The idol's form is both striking and unsettling. Its tall, segmented body appears deliberately structured, divided into distinct sections, each adorned with repeating patterns and symbolic markings. The faces carved into its upper portions are not naturalistic portraits. They are abstract, stylized, and deeply symbolic, blending human, animal, and possibly spiritual elements into a single form. The sheer scale of the sculpture implies extraordinary effort. Its creation would have required skilled craftsmanship, advanced stone tools, careful planning, and a shared cultural purpose strong enough to justify months or even years of labor. This alone challenges long-held assumptions about the simplicity of post-glacial hunter-gatherer societies. The circumstances of its preservation deepen the mystery. The peat bog in which the idol was found created a low-oxygen, highly acidic environment that prevented the wood from decaying. As a result, fine details remain visible today: the precise grooves of the carvings, subtle variations in line depth, and even traces of the tools used by its makers. Few prehistoric wooden objects anywhere in the world have survived with such clarity. Yet despite this extraordinary preservation, the meaning of the idol remains elusive. Mainstream archaeology interprets the Shiger idol within the context of early hunter-gatherer cultures of northern Eurasia. Many researchers believe the carvings represent a cosmological system, clan symbols, mythological beings, or spiritual concepts tied to survival in a harsh, newly transformed post-Ice Age landscape. The idol may have stood at a ritual site, marking sacred space or serving as a mediator between the human and spiritual worlds. Others suggest that the geometric patterns encode knowledge, seasonal cycles, territorial boundaries, or oral traditions carved into wood rather than spoken aloud. The repetition and order of the symbols imply intent rather than decoration, suggesting a visual language whose grammar we no longer understand. More speculative interpretations emerge precisely because of the idol's age and complexity. Its sophistication implies abstract symbolic thinking far earlier than once believed possible for mobile hunter-gatherer groups. Some researchers wonder whether the faces represent spirits, ancestors, or deities associated with shamanic traditions now lost to time. Others question whether the patterns reflect astronomical knowledge or environmental mapping encoded in symbolic form. One of the most striking revelations came from structural analysis. Evidence suggests that the idol may originally have been constructed from 7 separate wooden planks, joined together to form a single towering figure. This modular design implies an advanced understanding of materials, durability, and assembly. It also suggests a conceptual approach to construction that challenges traditional timelines for engineering thought. Scientific studies, including dendrochronology and repeated radiocarbon dating, have confirmed the idol's antiquity beyond reasonable doubt. What remains unresolved is why it was made, and what it meant to the people who created it. The Shiger idol occupies a unique position in human history. It is prehistoric, yet intellectually complex, a simple in material, yet monumental in intent. It exists at the intersection of art, ritual, technology, and belief, defying easy classification. Even today, those who stand before it are struck by the immediacy of its presence. Its gaze feels deliberate, its patterns feel intentional. It does not appear primitive or accidental. Instead, it suggests a worldview already rich with symbolism, structure, and meaning. The Shiger idol is more than an artifact. It is a bridge to a vanished world, the surviving echo of myth, ritual, and imagination from the dawn of human consciousness. As we contemplate this towering wooden figure, questions inevitably arise. Who carved it? What beliefs did it embody? Was it a guardian of sacred space, a record of knowledge, or a symbol meant to bind a community together across generations. The idol offers no answers, it simply endures, reminding us that human creativity and symbolic thought stretch far deeper into time than we often assume, and that beneath forests, bogs, and forgotten landscapes, there may still lie voices from the deep past, waiting to be heard. The Nebra sky disk, Europe's oldest map of the heavens, high atop the rolling hills of the Mittelberg in central Germany, beneath a sky that has stirred human wonder for countless generations. A small bronze object was unearthed in 1999 that would forever alter our understanding of prehistoric Europe. It is known as the Nebra sky disk at first glance. The disk appears modest, roughly 30 centimeters in diameter, gently curved, and weighing just over 2 kilograms. It does not immediately command attention like a monument or a weapon, yet its surface tells a far more extraordinary story, inlaid with delicate sheets of gold or celestial symbols. A crescent moon, a radiant circular disk interpreted as the sun or a full moon, and a scattering of stars among them, is a distinct cluster of 7 points, widely believed to represent the Pleiades, crafted approximately 3,600 years ago, during the early Bronze Age. The Nebra sky disk is not merely an artifact, it is a window into how ancient Europeans perceived the cosmos long before telescopes, written astronomy, or formal scientific models. The circumstances of its discovery were remarkable. The disk was buried alongside bronze swords, axes, and other valuable objects in a carefully arranged deposit, strongly suggesting ritual significance. This was not a lost object or discarded ornament, it was intentionally placed, perhaps as an offering, symbolic retirement of power, or a sacred act whose meaning has since faded from memory. Scientific dating places the disk around 1600 BC, a period when Bronze Age societies across Europe were expanding trade networks, refining metallurgy, and developing increasingly complex social structures. Yet nothing previously discovered from this era hinted at such a refined and deliberate representation of the sky. What makes the Nebra sky disk truly extraordinary is the depth of astronomical understanding it appears to encode. The arrangement of the sun and moon suggests knowledge of their cycles, while the placement of the Pleiades may relate to seasonal timing, crucial for agriculture in many ancient cultures. The rising and setting of this star cluster mark key moments in the farming year, signaling when to plant or harvest. Later modifications to the disk added to golden arcs along its edges, believed to represent the horizon and the angle between the solstices. These additions imply an awareness of the sun's changing path across the sky throughout the year, a concept requiring careful long-term observation. At some point, a final arc was added at the bottom, possibly symbolizing a solar boat, echoing cosmological motifs found across ancient Europe and the Near East. Mainstream archaeological interpretations suggest the disk may have functioned as a cosmological tool, a ritual object, or a teaching aid. It may have helped align lunar and solar calendars, reconcile seasonal discrepancies, or preserve astronomical knowledge within a priestly or elite class. Others see it as a symbol of authority, a demonstration that those who possessed it also claimed mastery over cosmic order itself. Yet the questions only deepen. How did Bronze Age communities acquire such precise celestial knowledge? Was it developed locally through generations of observation, or shared across vast networks connecting distant regions of Europe? Metallurgical analysis reveals that the bronze and gold came from different sources across Central Europe, confirming long-distance trade and cultural exchange. The disk has also inspired more speculative interpretations. Some researchers compare it to later astronomical instruments, calling it a protostar map or an early cosmological device. Others suggest it encodes myths or sacred narratives now lost, blending empirical observation with symbolic meaning in a way modern science struggles to fully decode. Scientific analysis confirms the disc's authenticity beyond doubt. The bronze casting techniques align with early Bronze Age methods, and microscopic study of the gold inlays reveals careful hammering and precise placement into prepared grooves. Isotopic testing further supports its prehistoric origin and complex production process, yet despite decades of study, the disc's ultimate purpose remains unresolved. Was it primarily a practical tool or a ceremonial symbol? Was it used privately by specialists or publicly within ritual gatherings? Did it function as a calendar, a cosmological diagram, or both at once? What makes the Nebra sky disk so compelling is this fusion of science and abstraction. Its symbols are simple, almost minimalist, yet they encode a sophisticated understanding of the sky. It challenges the assumption that prehistoric societies were limited to myth alone, revealing instead a deep engagement with observation, pattern, and cosmic order of today. As one stands before the Nebra sky disk in the museum, watching the gold catch the light, it feels less like an object from the past and more like a message carried forward through time. Someone, thousands of years ago, looked up at the same stars we see today and sought to understand their rhythm, their meaning, and their power over life on Earth. Who conceived this disk? Who held it, taught from it, or ritualized it? What other knowledge once accompanied it, now lost to time? The Nebra sky disk does not answer these questions, it simply endures, inviting us to look upward, as its creators once did, and to remember that humanity's fascination with the heavens is as old as civilization itself. The Kensington Runestone, a Viking message in the heart of America. Deep within the quiet forests of central Minnesota, where pine and birch trees rise beneath a pale northern sky, there exists a stone that has unsettled historians, linguists, and archaeologists for more than a century. It is known as the Kensington Runestone. At first glance, the stone appears remarkable, roughly 3 feet tall, carved from local granite. Its surface is mottled with lichen and softened by time. It looks like countless other stones scattered across the northern American landscape. Yet etched into its weathered face is something profoundly unexpected, a series of runic inscriptions that appear unmistakably Scandinavian in origin. These symbols tell a story that, if true, would rewrite a chapter of North American history. The Kensington Runestone was discovered in 1898 by a Swedish-American farmer named Olof Oman while clearing land near the small town of Kensington. According to Oman, the stone was entangled in the roots of a tree, buried and forgotten. When he freed it from the earth, he revealed rows of neatly carved runes arranged with deliberate order and care. The inscription, when translated, claims to describe a group of Scandinavian explorers who traveled through the region in the year 1362. More than a century before Christopher Columbus reached the Caribbean, the text recounts a journey by Norsemen, mentions their companions, describes hardship, and even alludes to violent encounters with local inhabitants. It reads not like random markings, but like a purposeful record of exploration, loss, and survival. For those inclined to believe, the implications are staggering if authentic. The Kensington Runestone would suggest that Scandinavian explorers penetrated deep into the North American interior long before the age of documented European colonization, extending far beyond the well-established Norse settlement at Land's Ox Meadows in Newfoundland. Yet from the moment of its discovery, controversy followed. Mainstream scholars have long approached the stone with skepticism. Linguistic analyses point to anomalies in the runes themselves, word choices, grammatical forms, and letter shapes that appear inconsistent with 14th century Scandinavian usage. Critics argue that some expressions seem suspiciously modern, more in line with 19th century Swedish dialects than medieval Norse language. These inconsistencies have led many historians to conclude that the stone is a hoax, perhaps carved by Oman himself or by someone in his community at the time of its discovery. Scandinavian immigrant communities in the American Midwest were deeply invested in preserving their heritage. The idea of Viking ancestors reaching America long before Columbus held powerful cultural appeal. Yet the runestone refuses to be dismissed so easily. Geological studies of the carving's weathering pattern suggest a degree of age that some researchers argue is difficult to reconcile with a late 19th century fabrication. The depth of erosion within the ruins, the lichen growth, and the overall surface patina have fueled ongoing debate. Some comparisons with nearby stones of known age hint that the inscription may have been exposed to the elements longer than critics are comfortable admitting. There is also the question of geography. The inscription's description of waterways, distances, and terrain aligns intriguingly well with features of the region, while this could reflect local knowledge available to a 19th century farmer. It also raises the unsettling possibility that the account is based on genuine exploration, or at least on stories far older than the stone itself. Speculation naturally followed. Some researchers propose that undocumented Norse expeditions ventured far inland via river systems, leaving behind traces now lost to time. Others suggest the runestone may be a 19th century creation inspired by oral traditions passed down through generations of Scandinavian settlers, blending myth, memory, and identity into stone. More fringe interpretations go further still, imagining lost transatlantic routes, suppressed histories, or forgotten episodes of medieval exploration. While these theories remain unproven, they highlight the powerful hold the stone exerts on the imagination, beyond questions of authenticity. The Kensington runestone raises deeper issues about how history is constructed, if genuine. It challenges long-held assumptions about the limits of medieval exploration and the timelines of European contact with the Americas, if fabricated. It remains no less fascinating, revealing how identity, memory, and cultural longing can shape artifacts meant to speak across generations. The stone itself is undeniably real. Its runes are deeply cut into hard granite, requiring time, skill, and determination. Whoever carved them intended the message to last, and it has for more than a century. The Kensington runestone has been examined, argued over, and displayed, refusing to fade into obscurity. It exists in a liminal space between evidence and interpretation, between skepticism and wonder. As one stands before the stone today, tracing the angular runes with the eye, the questions remain unresolved. Who carved these symbols, and why? Were they explorers recording a perilous journey, or storytellers shaping a legacy for the future? Is the stone a forgotten voice from medieval Europe, or a powerful reflection of immigrant identity in a new world? The Kensington runestone does not answer. It simply endures, silent, weathered, and defiant. It reminds us that history is rarely tidy, that the past often resists certainty, and that sometimes the most compelling mysteries are those that sit quietly beneath the trees, waiting for us to decide what we believe is possible. The Ural metal microobjects, a technology from deep time beneath the vast, snow-dusted expanse of the Ural Mountains. In regions so remote they escaped notice for generations, a discovery emerged that would quietly unsettle long-held assumptions about history, technology, and time itself. These finds are known as the Ural metal microobjects. They are not grand monuments or ceremonial relics. They do not command attention through size or ornamentation. Instead, their power lies in their minuteness. Some are so small they measure only a few millimeters across, barely visible without magnification, and yet, when examined closely, they reveal a level of precision that feels profoundly out of place in the deep geological past from which they are said to originate. The objects were reportedly recovered from sediment layers rich in minerals and coal. Deposits often dated to tens of millions of years old. Embedded within this ancient material were tiny metallic forms, perfectly shaped cylinders, discs, spirals, rods, and structures that resemble miniature gears or mechanical components. Their surfaces appear smooth, symmetrical, and deliberately formed, as though designed to fit together, rotate, or function as part of a larger system. It is not merely their form that raises questions, but their material. Analyses have indicated the presence of metals and alloys that suggest smelting or refining processes under microscopic examination. Some pieces exhibit patterns that resemble machining marks or wear, features commonly associated with mechanical use rather than natural formation, and so the question arises, one that echoes uneasily through both science and speculation: how could objects with such apparent precision exist in geological layers that predate human metallurgy by millions of years? Mainstream scientific interpretations urge caution. Some researchers argue that these micro-objects may be naturally occurring mineral formations, shaped by pressure, heat, and time into forms that coincidentally resemble manufactured components of nature. After all, is capable of extraordinary symmetry and complexity. Others suggest the possibility of modern contamination. Materials introduced into older strata during mining operations, drilling, or excavation, later mistaken for ancient inclusions. Yet these explanations struggle to fully resolve the puzzle. The combination of complex geometry, metallic composition, and apparent functional design is difficult to reconcile with known geological processes alone. The objects do not resemble typical crystals, nodules, or concretions. Their shapes appear purposeful, consistent, and repeated across multiple finds. This tension between explanation and anomaly has fueled more speculative interpretations. Some propose that the micro-objects are remnants of a lost technological culture, one that existed long before recorded human history and vanished without leaving larger traces. Others venture further still, suggesting the possibility of non-human origins, artifacts of intelligence not accounted for in conventional models of Earth's past. While such ideas remain firmly outside accepted scientific consensus, they persist because the objects themselves refuse to settle comfortably into known categories. They sit at the crossroads of geology, archaeology, and imagination, neither easily dismissed nor fully explained. Scientific study has provided fragments of clarity but no final answers. Metallurgical tests hint at deliberate alloying. Microscopic inspection reveals uniformity and structure inconsistent with random fracture. Yet without clear provenance, controlled excavation records, or definitive dating of the objects themselves, their story remains incomplete. What makes the Ural metal micro-objects so compelling is not simply the mystery of their origin, but what they represent. They challenge the assumption that technological complexity must always scale upward, that innovation leaves behind obvious ruins, tools, or monuments. They suggest the unsettling possibility that traces of knowledge or capability could exist at scales so small, or in contexts so unexpected, that they evade our usual frameworks of discovery. Each object is tiny, almost insignificant on its own, and yet, together, they raise enormous questions. What if our understanding of technological evolution is incomplete? What if intelligence, human or otherwise, has manifested in forms that leave behind only subtle, fragmentary traces? What if the deep history of our planet holds chapters we have not yet learned how to read? Examined beneath a microscope, these objects appear almost unreal, perfectly shaped metal forms emerging from ancient Earth. Silent and indifferent to the debates they provoke, they offer no explanation, no inscription, no context, only presence. The Ural metal micro-objects remain unresolved. They may ultimately prove to be rare natural formations, misunderstood through the lens of modern expectation, or they may point toward something far stranger, a reminder that the past is not obligated to conform to our assumptions. They are questions crystallized in metal, whispers from deep time, and until their story is fully understood, they stand as one of the most unsettling and fascinating anomalies ever recovered from the depths of the Earth, urging us to look closer, think deeper, and remain open to the unknown. The Nazca mummy figures beings at the edge of human history in the arid plains of southern Peru, where the desert stretches endlessly beneath a merciless blue sky. An unsettling discovery has emerged from the silence of the sands near the region made famous by the immense geoglyphs known as the Nazca lines. Figures were found hidden within ancient burial contexts that defy nearly every expectation of Andean archaeology. These are now known as the Nazca mummy figures. Unlike traditional mummies of the Indies, carefully wrapped in textiles and aligned with well-documented mortuary practices, these figures present a startling departure from the familiar. Their forms are immediately resting, the elongated skulls extend far beyond typical human proportions. Hands display only 3 long fingers, each ending in hardened, nail-like tips, as skeletal structures appear lightweight yet dense. With proportions that resist easy anatomical classification, some of the figures are small, scarcely approaching the height of a child. Others are closer to human scale. This variation alone complicates interpretation, suggesting that these were not isolated curiosities, but part of a broader phenomenon. Their skin, darkened and desiccated by time, clings tightly to bone like ancient parchment, preserved by the desert's dry climate with remarkable clarity. Mainstream scientific approaches urge restraint and careful analysis. Cranial elongation, after all, was a known cultural practice in parts of South America, where skulls were intentionally shaped during infancy as a marker of identity, status, or beauty. Environmental factors and post-mortem processes can also distort skeletal remains in ways that appear anomalous at first glance. Yet even when these explanations are considered, certain features remain deeply problematic. Cranial deformation does not account for the consistent presence of 3 fingers across multiple specimens, nor does it explain the uniformity of skeletal traits that differ from known human variation. The hands, in particular, appear anatomically integrated, not altered or artificially modified. The context of the discoveries adds another layer of mystery. Many of the figures were found alongside objects typical of Nazca culture: ceramic vessels, textiles, and ritual offerings. This suggests they were not treated as curiosities or aberrations, but as beings of significance, deliberately placed and ceremonially regarded. Whatever these figures represented, they appear to have held meaning within the cultural and spiritual framework of the people who buried them. This raises difficult questions. Were these figures meant to depict deities, spirits, or mythic ancestors? Were they ritual effigies designed to embody otherworldly beings believed to inhabit the desert, the sky, or the unseen realms? Or could they represent a population or biological variation not yet fully understood? Speculative interpretations have inevitably followed. Some propose that the figures may represent an unknown branch of humanity, a hominin group that coexisted with ancient cultures and left behind only fragmentary traces. Others venture further, suggesting non-human origins or hybrid beings woven into ritual practice and belief. These ideas remain controversial and unproven, but they persist because the physical evidence resists simple dismissal. Scientific investigation has begun to shed partial light. Radiocarbon dating has placed some specimens within the time frame of the Nazca civilization, roughly between 200 BC and 600 CE. Anatomical studies indicate that the remains are not modern fabrications in some cases. Preliminary DNA analyses have been conducted, though results remain incomplete, contested, or inconclusive, offering hints rather than definitive answers. What emerges is not clarity, but complexity. The Nazca mummy figures exist in a liminal space, neither fully explained nor easily ignored. They are both familiar and alien, evoking human form while simultaneously challenging the boundaries of what we consider human. They force us to confront uncomfortable questions about variation, symbolism, and the limits of archaeological interpretation. Were these figures intended to inspire awe, to serve as guardians of sacred knowledge, or to embody beings believed to exist beyond ordinary perception? Or do they preserve a biological reality that history has not yet learned how to interpret? As researchers continue to study them, the figures remain silent. Their elongated skulls and three-fingered hands offer no explanation. Only presence, they stand as questions made flesh and bone. Reminders that the archaeological record is not a closed book, but a fragmentary archive filled with gaps, contradictions, and unsettling possibilities. The Nazca mummy figures challenge the comforting assumption that we already understand the full scope of ancient humanity. They suggest that beneath the desert sands of Peru, and perhaps beneath the surface of history itself, lie stories that have yet to be fully told, and until those stories are understood, these enigmatic beings will remain where they belong, at the edge of certainty, waiting for us to decide how much of the unknown we are willing to confront. The Dogu figurines, Japan's silent witnesses of an unknown world. The soft, rolling hills of Japan's Toku region fade gently into mist, their forests and river valleys wrapped in a quiet that feels older than memory itself. Beneath this landscape, shaped by ice, fire, and centuries of human presence, lie some of the most enigmatic artifacts of Japan's prehistoric past, small, fragile, and deeply unsettling. They emerge from the soil like whispers from another age. They are known as the Dogu figurines. At first glance, these clay figures appear modest in scale. Most stand no taller than 30 centimeters, easily held into hands, yet their presence is anything but small, unearthed primarily from sites of the Jomon period, spanning roughly from 14,000 to 300 BC. Dogu have been found across northern and central Japan, scattered through settlements, riverbanks, caves, and ritual grounds. Wherever they appear, they bring with them more questions than answers, crafted from clay and fired with remarkable skill. Dogu figurines display an astonishing diversity of form. Their surfaces are covered in intricate patterns, spirals, ridges, punctures, and geometric motifs applied with deliberate care. Some figures are unmistakably humanoid, with exaggerated hips, rounded torsos, and pronounced bellies. Others verge on abstraction, their forms distorted or stylized to the point where classification becomes uncertain. No two Dogu are truly alike, suggesting not mass production, but individual intention. Archaeologists have long debated their purpose. The most widely accepted interpretation views Dogu as ritual objects, possibly connected to fertility, healing, or protection. Many figurines emphasize reproductive features, while others appear to depict injury or fragmentation. Intriguingly, a large number of Dogu were found deliberately broken rather than accidental damage. Scholars believe this destruction was intentional, a ritual act meant to release, transfer, or neutralize the power believed to reside within the figure. Some Dogu show signs of repeated handling. Their surfaces are worn smooth in places, as though touched again and again over long periods of use. This suggests they were not merely symbolic objects buried once and forgotten, but active participants in the spiritual or daily life of the Jomon people. What draws the modern eye most powerfully, however, are their faces. Many Dogu possess large, almond-shaped eyes, wide and unblinking, and like anything commonly seen in other Jomon art, these eyes seem to stare outward with an intensity that feels almost confrontational, as though the figurines are not merely being observed, but observing in return. Some researchers interpret these eyes as symbols of heightened perception, spiritual awareness, or shamanic vision, a way of seeing beyond the ordinary world. Others, moving beyond conventional archaeology, have noted how unfamiliar these faces feel. Their proportions, expressions, and gaze appear strangely otherworldly. While such interpretations remain speculative, the question lingers uncomfortably. Were these figures meant to represent humans, spirits, or something else entirely? Adding to the mystery are the markings that cover many Dogu bodies: segmented limbs, layered patterns, and symmetrical designs have led some observers to compare them to protective suits or armor for a culture without metalworking or advanced textiles. Such imagery is striking. Mainstream scholars caution against reading modern ideas into ancient art, emphasizing symbolic representation over literal depiction. Yet the consistency and complexity of these patterns suggest they held deep meaning for their creators. The locations where Dogu are found offer few definitive clues. Some were buried beneath homes, others placed near water, and still others discovered in areas later covered by volcanic ash. This wide distribution hints at a complex belief system, one that integrated landscape, ritual, and material objects into a cohesive spiritual world. The figurines may have been offerings to the land, intermediaries between humans and unseen forces, or vessels designed to absorb illness, misfortune, or danger. Scientific study has only deepened the intrigue. Analysis of the clay reveals careful selection of materials, sometimes sourced from specific locations rather than the most convenient nearby soil. Experimental archaeology has shown that Jamon firing techniques were far more sophisticated than once believed. Without kilns capable of sustained high temperatures, these artisans still achieved remarkable durability, precision, and control. The Dogu are not crude relics of a primitive society. They are products of a culture deeply attuned to symbolism, ritual, and material expression over time. Interpretations have multiplied: fertility icons, healing talismans, shamanic effigies, embodiments of spiritual intermediaries. Each explanation captures part of the truth, yet none fully contain it. There remains a persistent sense that these figures were meant to engage with forces beyond the ordinary. Whether psychological, spiritual, or cosmological, their diversity only reinforces this impression. Some Dogu are rounded and gentle, others sharp and angular. Some appear serene, others almost confrontational. A few are eerily intact, while others bear deliberate fractures together. They suggest not a single meaning, but a language of forms, one spoken across generations through clay, fire, and ritual gestured in museums today. Dogu sit behind glass, their ancient surfaces lit softly, their eyes still wide. They feel less like artifacts and more like presences, silent witnesses to a worldview that has vanished, yet not entirely faded. The Dogu figurines challenge our assumptions about prehistoric societies. They reveal a people capable of abstraction, experimentation, and profound symbolic thought. They remind us that the past was not simpler than the present, only different, shaped by questions and beliefs we are still struggling to understand. As mist rises once more over the hills of Thoku, it is easy to imagine the hands that shaped these figures, pressing patterns into wet clay, breathing meaning into form, and placing them carefully into the earth. The Dogu remain silent, patient, and unresolved, and perhaps that is their true power. They do not explain, they invite. They ask us to look closer, to sit with uncertainty, and to accept that some corners of human history are not meant to be solved, only contemplated. The Chachapoya sarcophagi, guardians of the cloud forest, high in the cloud-draped Andes of northern Peru, where mist coils endlessly through deep valleys and limestone cliffs rise like frozen waves from the jungle, stand the silent remnants of a civilization that refused to let death fade quietly into the earth. Here, suspended between forest and sky, are the Chachapoya sarcophagi, one of the most haunting funerary traditions ever created, known today as the sarcophagi of Kragia. These structures cling to sheer rock faces in places that seem almost unreachable from a distance. They appear like watchful figures gazing out over the valley below, elongated, upright, and unmistakably anthropomorphic. Some stand nearly 2 meters tall. They do not lie hidden beneath the soil. They stand exposed, elevated, and enduring, as if meant to remain present long after death. The people who built them, the Chachapoya, flourished roughly between the 8th and 15th centuries. Long before the Inca absorbed their territory, often referred to as the warriors of the clouds. They inhabited one of the most challenging environments in the Andes, a realm of steep mountains, dense cloud forests, and unpredictable weather. Written records of their culture are scarce, but what remains carved into stone and clay speaks with quiet authority. The sarcophagi themselves are constructed from a mixture of clay, stone, and plant fibers, shaped into tall, coffin-like forms. Many bear stylized human faces molded onto their surfaces, eyes, noses, and mouths reduced to symbolic expressions rather than lifelike portraits. Some are painted with geometric patterns or faint traces of pigment, suggesting that color and symbolism once played a larger role in their appearance. Inside each sarcophagus rested a single individual, often placed in a seated or tightly wrapped position, sometimes accompanied by offerings or textiles that have largely vanished with time, like mass burials or communal tombs. These were individual monuments, suggesting status, lineage, or spiritual importance in death. For the Chachapoy was not a return to anonymity, it was an elevation. What makes these sarcophagi truly extraordinary is where they are placed. Many are positioned hundreds of meters above the valley floor, embedded into vertical cliffs accessible only by narrow ledges or paths long since eroded away. Transporting materials and human remains to such locations would have required careful planning, cooperation, and an intimate understanding of the terrain. Why choose such perilous heights? Mainstream interpretations suggest a blend of practicality and belief. Elevated placement protected the dead from animals, floods, and grave robbers. At the same time, height carried spiritual meaning. By raising the deceased above the world of the living, the Chachapoy may have believed they were placing them closer to the sky, the mountains, and the realm of ancestral spirits. Yet the effort involved suggests something deeper than security alone. These sarcophagi feel deliberate in their defiance of gravity, as though the act of placing them was itself a ritual, and assertion that death was not an ending, but a transformation. Some scholars believe the anthropomorphic forms were intended to maintain identity after death, allowing the spirit to remain recognizable. Others propose that the sarcophagi served as guardians, watching over the valley and protecting the community below. In this interpretation, the dead were not removed from society, but repositioned within it, becoming sentinels between worlds. The landscape itself appears to have mattered. Certain sarcophagi align with prominent features of the valley, natural sightlines, or prevailing winds. This suggests the placement was not random, but carefully chosen as part of a broader sacred geography, one that integrated cliffs, sky, and forest into a unified cosmological vision. Speculation naturally follows such an audacious design. How did the Chachapoys stabilize these heavy structures on sheer rock faces? What techniques did they use to access such heights repeatedly? Were wooden scaffolds involved, now long decayed? Or did they possess methods of construction and spatial planning that have left no trace beyond the structures themselves? Scientific analysis confirms the antiquity of the sarcophagi and the careful preparation of the remains within them. Radiocarbon dating places them firmly within the Chachapoy cultural horizon. Osteological studies show intentional mummification practices, while material analysis reveals an advanced understanding of how clay, stone, and organic fibers could be combined to endure extreme environmental conditions. And yet, despite these insights, the deeper meaning remains elusive. The faces on the sarcophagi are at once human and abstract, expressive yet unreadable. They feel less like portraits and more like symbols, perhaps representations of transformation, guardianship, or a liminal state between life and death. Their stillness invites contemplation rather than explanation. Beyond archaeology, the Chachapoy sarcophagi provoke a profound reflection on how humans confront mortality. These people did not hide death away, they placed it where it could be seen, remembered, and honored. Etched into the very cliffs that shaped their lives, they remind us that ancient societies were not only engineers and builders, but philosophers of existence. In lifting their dead toward the sky, The Chachapoya were making a statement about continuity, memory, and the bond between the living and those who came before today. As clouds drift past the limestone walls and fog wraps the valley below, the sarcophagi remain where they have stood for centuries. Silent, watchful, and moved, they are not merely tombs. They are messages carved into the mountains themselves, reminders that the ancient world still holds secrets suspended just beyond our reach, waiting patiently in stone, mist, and silence. The Iron Pillar of Delhi, the metal that refused to age amid the restless pulse of modern Delhi, where traffic hums and centuries overlap in layers of stone and memory. There stands an object that seems profoundly indifferent to time. Within the quiet grounds of the Kut complex rises the Iron Pillar of Delhi, a monument not defined by ornament or scale alone, but by an almost uncanny defiance of decay, nearly 7 meters tall and forged from a single massive shaft of wrought iron. The pillar commands attention through restraint. Its surface is smooth, dark, and remarkably intact for more than 15 centuries. It has endured monsoon rains, scorching heat, atmospheric pollution, and the slow corrosion that consumes nearly all exposed metals, and yet it remains largely untouched by rust, as if time itself passed around it rather than through it. This quiet resistance has made the pillar one of the most enduring metallurgical enigmas in human history. An inscription near its base, carved in elegant Sanskrit script, offers the only direct voice from its creators. The text honors a powerful ruler widely identified as Chandragupta II of the Gupta dynasty, who ruled during the 4th–5th centuries CE. It praises his valor and devotion, suggesting that the pillar once stood not merely as a technical achievement, but as a declaration of sovereignty and divine favor, originally erected elsewhere and later relocated to its present site. The pillar was likely associated with a sacred complex, possibly aligned with astronomical or ritual considerations. Yet the inscription explains why the pillar was raised, never how it was made. The technical achievement embodied in the Iron Pillar is staggering, weighing over 6 tons and composed of exceptionally pure wrought iron. It was created without modern furnaces, temperature gauges, chemical analysis, or industrial casting methods. Metallurgical studies reveal that the pillar was formed through forge welding, a painstaking process in which individual iron blooms were repeatedly heated, hammered, and fused together until they became a single, cohesive structure. What truly sets the pillar apart, however, is its chemistry. Analysis shows unusually high phosphorus content and an almost complete absence of sulfur and manganese, an accidental impossibility by modern standards, yet somehow achieved deliberately or intuitively by ancient Indian smiths. Over time, this composition formed a thin, stable protective layer on the surface, preventing oxidation and corrosion. The result is a natural passivation process so effective that even modern steel struggles to replicate it without coatings or chemical treatments. The question lingers: how did they know? No surviving texts describe the techniques used, no manuals, no treatises, no recorded formulas. The knowledge appears complete, refined, and then lost later. Indian metallurgy never quite replicated the same combination of scale, purity, and corrosion resistance. It is as though this mastery emerged briefly, crystallized into iron, and then vanished beyond its technical brilliance. The Iron Pillar carries profound symbolic weight in Indian cosmological thought. Vertical monuments often represent the axis mundi, a connection between earth and the heavens rising from stone toward the sky. The pillar may have been intended as more than a royal marker. It may have embodied cosmic order, spiritual alignment, and the ruler's role as mediator between the human and divine realms. Its very endurance reinforces that symbolism. While dynasties fell, religions shifted, and cities were rebuilt atop older ruins, the pillar remained unchanged, and moved, and yielding. Speculation naturally follows such endurance. Some see in the pillar evidence of advanced metallurgical knowledge lost to history. Others imagine a deeper understanding of material science guided by ritual, tradition, and long experimentation rather than written theory. More imaginative interpretations view the pillar as a deliberate message to the future, a monument designed not merely to commemorate a king, but to outlast civilizations. Archaeology offers partial answers. Science explains the chemistry, engineering reconstructs the forging process. But there remains a gap between explanation and understanding, a space occupied by human ingenuity, intuition, and vision. How was such a massive object raised and aligned without cranes, steel cables, or precision instruments? How were flaws avoided in a structure that could not afford internal weakness? And perhaps most puzzling of all, why did this knowledge not become the foundation of later technological traditions? The Iron Pillar of Delhi stands at the intersection of certainty and mystery. It is fully real, fully studied, and still incomplete in our comprehension today. Visitors walk past it casually, some even reaching out to touch its cool surface, unaware that they are standing before a question forged in iron, a relic that has witnessed empires rise and fall without changing itself, a monument that does not merely survive history, but quietly challenges it. The pillar does not speak, it does not explain, it simply endures, and in that endurance, it asks us something unsettling and profound. What other knowledge once existed, complete, functional, and elegant, only to disappear, leaving behind a single object as proof that we once knew more than we remember? What history still refuses to explain as we step back from these artifacts, objects carved from stone, forged from metal, shaped from clay, wood, and bone. One truth becomes impossible to ignore. The past is not silent because it has nothing to say. It is silent because we have not yet learned how to listen. Each relic we have explored stands at the edge of certainty. The iron pillar that does not rust, the disc shaped like a machine before machines, the maps that hint at forgotten shores, the figures that do not resemble any known people, the objects buried where they should not exist. They all share a common trait. They refuse to fit neatly into the story we tell ourselves about human progress. History is often presented as a straight line, stone to bronze, bronze to iron, simple to complex, primitive to advanced. But these artifacts suggest something far less orderly. A past shaped by lost experiments, vanished knowledge, cultural brilliance that flickered briefly and disappeared, leaving only fragments behind. Perhaps these objects are not proof of impossible civilizations or hidden technologies. Perhaps they are something more unsettling, evidence that human knowledge has risen and fallen many times, that innovation is not guaranteed to survive, that entire ways of understanding the world can vanish, erased by climate, conquest, or time itself. What if progress is not a ladder but a tide, rising, receding, leaving behind traces in unexpected places? These artifacts remind us that ancient people were not naive, nor were they merely struggling toward modernity. They observed the sky, they mastered materials, they encoded meaning into objects meant to endure beyond their own lifetimes, and in doing so, they left behind questions that modern science can measure but not fully answer. And perhaps that is the true power of these discoveries. They challenge certainty, they invite humility. They remind us that history is not finished speaking somewhere beneath the soil, beneath the ice, beneath the ocean floor. There are still objects waiting, silent, patient, and touched by explanation, not to rewrite history in a dramatic stroke, but to slowly unravel our confidence in how much we think we already know. The past is not closed, it is watching, and it is still full of secrets.